be learning lots to be knowing about people. Gotta teach them, sit 'em right down, then you gotta teach them.
Want to get it off your chest? You're in the right place. They accuse this show of being run by boobs. Well, let me tell you about us boobs. We're real and we're spectacular. Want politics and fun sprinkled with a lot of laughs? Heard in every state in the Union and 1,000 cities around the world. We just finished 17 years of broadcast excellence. Now in our 18th year. The Dave Weinbaum Show is streaming live all over the world.
Hey, all right. Good morning, everybody. Obviously, I'm not Dave. So David asked me to come in and guest host today. And so while he is on vacation, about time he took a vacation after 18 years, he's always tried to do those things on the road. And I'm glad that he started to take some real time off. But hey, I really appreciate being on today and thank Dave very much for giving me this opportunity. And we are going to take a little bit of a different track today. We're a lot of conversation going on in the blogosphere and social media about data centers. So we're going to talk about all things data center today. And so while we may get off onto some other subjects, you know the show, you know how it works. We can run down a rabbit hole pretty quick around here. But we're going to try to stay in the kind of that vein. So try to get people caught up to date, separate the wheat from the chaff, try to figure out what's real and what isn't real out there on the internet. Unfortunately, folks are getting most of their information from sources that are less reliable. And so we're going to try to figure a little bit of this out today. So right off the top, we have JJ Bradshaw is going to be joining us here shortly. And JP, when we got him on, you'll let me know. But the big things about the data centers are just to kind of get everybody a basis of where we're going to be at with this. Data centers have been around for quite a little while. Practically since the internet, there's been quote unquote data centers. The biggest part of data processing right now revolves around artificial intelligence, without a doubt. But most of that is based around commerce. And so rough numbers, 80 to 90% of data center usage, what we're calling data center usage, is probably better called credit card processing centers. This is also where they store all the stuff you do on Facebook, and all your credit card purchases, and certainly Amazon and those online stores consume a lot of space on data centers. We've all heard about cloud computing and cloud storage. A lot of folks out there probably use the quote unquote cloud to store their daily computer activity, their pictures and things like that. And because imaging takes an enormous amount of memory in order to do that, typically it's cheaper for large companies that deal with that to use the cloud, the quote unquote cloud, in order to do that. So our data center is a new thing. No, they're not a new thing. They've been around for a while. Now, however, what we are seeing now are what we call the hyperscale. These are the really big ones. That's generally anything over 10,000 square feet that uses more than 100 megawatts of power. So in today's modern world, with AI now coming into its full, obviously that consumes a lot of space in the system. But the thing that folks should really know or pay attention to is that it consumes a lot of power. So to kind of give you some rough numbers, in order to service 80,000 households with all of the bells and whistles that we have in the internet right now with the social media and the cloud computing and the cloud storage, that 80,000 people, that the data center to support that would use about 100 megawatts of power. So you can do the math on that one really quick and figure out that we're going to be eating up a lot of juice with these things. And I think that's probably the thing that folks should be most concerned about, because that's going to require an expansion of the infrastructure, power generation, things like that, that somebody's going to pay for. And, you and I, we get our electric bill, we pay our electric bill. We don't have much control over what that charge is. And the power companies can run that number up however they want in order to be able to provide power. So we get our power from two different places here in Missouri, typically. One of them is through our co-ops. In fact, I'm on a co-op, and just about everybody in a rural area around, certainly around Rolla, is on a co-op. The other way is through investor-owned utilities, and investor-owned utilities are companies like Evergy and Ameren and Liberty here in Missouri. They have a lot of customers, and so while the power usage in a co-op is spread out evenly, there really is no. While there's opportunities for quantity purchases, there's really not a different rate for each individual customer, by the bylaws and the standards created by the federal government whenever they allowed co-ops. However, in the investor-owned utilities, there's no such thing. It's a private company. They can make deals with anybody they want. And so you can imagine a situation where a big power user like a Google comes in and puts in one of these hyperscale systems that's using, several megawatts of power, where they're going to get a special deal. And that special deal then can include a lot of things, not the least of which would be something called construction work in progress, which the legislature passed in favor of the investor-owned utilities. And so what I envision is going to happen is a lot of that additional infrastructure required by these big power consumers are going to be pushed off on residential customers. I think that's where people really need to focus whenever we talk about data centers, because I'm sure folks don't want to give up their iPhone, and
Right.
I'm positive they don't want to give up their credit card.
I'm fortunate because where I live at, I have Intercounty Electric, which is a co-op. I've heard from people that I know in St. James for probably at least 2 years now that they have had extra fees added to their electricity bills that they really can't explain what they are, but they're substantial. I mean, we're talking about they make up a majority of the bill.
Oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's announced that this Amazon distribution center is coming into St. James. And so my wonderment is, was that a fee to help supplement for them? Because Amazon's going to get a tax break. I'm also assuming they're going to get a good rate on utilities. And I think for those in St. James, the concern is it's coming in to create jobs, but then how's it going to affect their utility rates? Is this going to be more of the same? And so I don't know. It's kind of an interesting situation. Before, I never would have thought of this area being appealing for this kind of thing. Walmart came in several years ago with their distribution center, and now Amazon's building one, and maybe this is just the start where they're looking to come into some of these rural areas. So I don't know. It's interesting to me on both sides where this could lead to.
Well, and as you pointed it out, it's like a lot of it is just simply logistics. Like if it's a distribution center where they're transferring hard things like packages, right? Well, then you need lots of real estate for that, and usually you want to go where the real estate's cheap, but you have good access to transportation. Well, fortunately, that's what we have around here. That meets the
criteria.
Yeah. Then secondary to that is availability of a workforce. A little more problematic, but not really whenever you consider the way we commute here in rural areas. It's, we had people that lived right here in Rolla who would commute every day to the Fenton Chrysler plant to work there. It's all 4-lane, and we're used to driving a long ways where you probably wouldn't get that same kind of effect in the urban environment. then the other thing too is that Amazon knows that efficiency is going to come with AI.
Right.
That's going to reduce the workforce. They still need the big real estate in order to move packages, but they probably won't need as big a workforce going
Right.
into the future. And once again, like we said, that's all power consumption. That's all AC electricity power consumption. So without a doubt, we're going to have to build power plants, and those power plants cost money. And so with what was passed by the legislature, construction work in progress allows those investor-owned utilities to be able to charge you on your bill for a power plant they're going to build at some point in the future.
And it may be one that maybe you won't even benefit from.
You most definitely won't, because, for instance, Ameren said that, hey, we need to do this because a small modular reactor is going to cost $14 billion.
Right.
And so we need to save up now. Well, whose money they're saving up is your money, right? Now, the traditional way of doing those, and we sit here and we think, oh, yeah, well, that kind of makes sense, because if I want to buy a new car, the best way for me to do that is to save up over time. Well, that's fine for you, because it's your money putting into a bank account to buy something.
It's your choice of what you're doing with it.
Yeah. And it benefits you directly, right? And so, but just, as you pointed out, charging me for a power plant that I will never get any benefit from, well, is a bit crazy, right?
It's kind of like, reminds me of Social Security, where you pour all this money in and then you might get a small dividend off of it when it's all said and done.
Right.
It's nowhere near what you paid in. It's a fraction.
Well, it's my neighbor gives me a ride to work, and so what he's going to do is he says, I'm going to buy a new car 25 years ago or from now, and I want you to start paying for that new car. And it's like, well, I'm not going to be working 25 years from now, so you won't be giving me a ride to work. Well, that's okay. I'll be giving somebody else a ride to work,
and you can pay for theirs.
Yeah, and you get to pay for theirs.
The good old pay to head system. We got JJ Bradshaw on the line.
All right,
JJ, what is going on?
Good morning, gentlemen.
Hey,
well,
JJ.
I didn't walk in here prepared to talk about this, but my background is electrical engineering, so I do have some idea about power grid stability and so forth. So I'll give you this off the top of my head. And beyond that, I got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about. But
all right. Well, we can go down rabbit holes here, JJ. So we'll start here, and then we'll just run down and find us a rabbit hole to run down.
Happens all the time. Dave drags me into Never Never Land fairly often. With an engineering background, our power grid in the United States is aging. Many of the transformers that are used are 35, 40 years old. And when they were designed and built, they had a life expectancy of about 25 years. So we're on shaky ground on the distribution end of things. And one of the things that I've been concerned about for many years now is EMP, electromagnetic pulse. If our enemies chose to use an electromagnetic pulse device, which is a nuclear explosion high in the atmosphere, a number of countries have that capability, China and Russia and us, by the way. We could pretty much wipe out the power grid. And that's not a very good thing. So some forward-thinking people at the federal level and certainly in the electric utilities have been looking at hardening our grid, at least making the large users pretty well bulletproof. If we had an EMP pulse event, you would be without power for many months. And of course, with refrigeration now not usable, starvation, very good possibility, and our enemies know that. Our power grid is running about 85% all the time, 85% of capacity. Now that varies from day to night. Nighttime, of course, goes down, daytime goes up. But that 15% that's left is not an awful lot of margin. And when you put in a huge power draw, like an AI center, you got a real problem. You're going to have to put dedicated lines in that, and you're going to have the generation capacity to keep that running uneventfully. Now, these things run 24/7. A power flop is not a very good thing as far as they're concerned. Do they have backup power? Yes, they'll design that in. Another thing that's you haven't talked about yet, but we're going to talk about, is the cooling infrastructure that's required for such a large industrial endeavor. You got an awful lot of power going in, and part of that is dissipated as heat. Things are not 100% efficient. Now you got to cool this thing. Well, what are you going to cool it with? Well, if you put a bunch of wells down, you start to drain our aquifer, because we're talking a tremendous amount of cooling water. Well, you say, okay, we got rivers around. How about we suck some river water in, let this thing heat it up and discharge it? Well, at least on paper, that sounds like a pretty good idea, unless you happen to be downstream from that, where your river that was running 58 degrees Fahrenheit is now running 65 degrees Fahrenheit, and the fish kills and snail kills and all the things that occur as a result of that. Not a very good idea. And draining our aquifers is not a very good idea. Sucking up fresh water and then using it to cool and then discharging it into the rivers and creeks. Sooner or later, you're going to deplete that aquifer to the point that the local wells aren't going to be, they'll be sucking air. So yeah, I don't mean to be a Karen on this thing, but there's a lot of negatives that are tied to this that nobody has seemed to put reasonable solutions in place for. So I'm not a happy camper about AI centers. If they were distributed, if they were small centers that drew maybe 50, 60 kilowatts a pop, that would be a lot easier on our grid rather than 18, 20 megawatts. Awful lot easier on the grid, because remember, that grid is an aging infrastructure and we're not replacing it fast enough. Let me talk about substations for a minute. There are substations scattered all over this country, and those substations have very large three-phase transformers. Each substation has at least one, some multiples. Up near St. Louis at Fenton, there are 13 different three-phase that come into that substation and leave it. That's where the old Chrysler plant was.
Right.
Those transformers are custom built. There's not some standardized transformer that they plug into these things. Not like the transformer on the pole, where they're very well delineated. You know how many kilowatts you got to have. They know which transformer to stick up there. Substations transformers, not the case. And the lead time now for a U.S. made transformer, now you can get them quicker out of China. Not so sure I'd want to, but it is about 35 weeks. So even on an emergency call, if you have a transformer fail and you don't have a spare stash someplace, you got a problem. And you've got residential users that have no electric for months on end.
Yeah, not that long ago, I can't remember the exact date, but locally here somewhere, they had one of those big transformers fail. And the only one, and it was in the middle of summertime, so it was warm outside. And the only one that was immediately available was in Alaska. So they put it on a ship, shipped it through the Panama Canal, brought it to New Orleans, put it on a barge, shipped it up the barge until they got to I think it was Cape Girardeau. Then they had to put it on a truck. Now you can imagine what this looked like. They had to shut down the highways and had to take a very circuitous route in order to get it to our area, because there was, several bridges that they couldn't get it under, obviously. And so they had to go over the top. And so there were power lines that had to be moved and raised up in order to get that transformer in. So, you hit it right on the head. Now, don't you think that a lot of that is on those power companies to have kept up with those infrastructure upgrades as they went along?
Well, the onus may be on them to do that, but recognize they're intended to be a profit-making enterprise. And Intercounty in particular has a setup to do refunds for their ratepayers. So they're running on a pretty thin margin. And it's a pretty difficult sell in the boardroom to say, okay, we've got $300,000 worth of transformers that we need to buy for spares. just in case something happens. Well, the MBAs in that room are going to say, no, white boy, that's not a good use of our funds. So you've got a built-in problem there. Now, the cooperatives and Ameren and others that have the generating capacity are part of a network where if I've got a transformer in my spares that you need, I will ship it to you. We cooperate with each other. That works pretty good if you have an individual failure here and there. If you have an electromagnetic pulse event, you don't have nearly enough to keep up. You don't have nearly enough to remedy the problem.
So
we need to harden that grid in the worst sort of way. Now, there's some federal folks looking at that, but so far it's too little, too late. When your enemies can take out your power grid, they've won.
But the unfortunate part of that is that I think in some of those boardrooms it has been discussed, because we're talking about the IOUs, the investor-owned utilities. They're a for-profit business, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that, hey, if we want to maximize our profit on the front end, and we know that we are quote unquote too big to fail, and that means the federal government will come in and rescue us. And I'm certain that figures into the calculus there as far as the aging infrastructure is concerned, because Ameren and the rest of them always had the option to make those improvements, excuse me, in the system all along, and in a regular order. But just as you rightly pointed out, they have stockholders and they have a board of directors that all want to make profit. And unfortunately, what we're seeing now is the shift, especially when we talk about AI, toward, hey, I want my money now. I don't care what happens in the future. I want my money now, because I've been learning a lot about AI here lately, and the focus is on what they call AGI, artificial general intelligence. And so to make the distinction there, artificial intelligence is the thing that runs your power plant or your water system or whatever. But artificial general intelligence is, the next thing to being self-aware. They did a couple of experiments, and this should scare people. It really should, because the experts are the ones that are talking about this. They ran some experiments with some current versions, and in one of the experiments, one of the members of the task force had sent an email to another member and said, "Hey, we're going to get rid of version 1 and replace it with version 2." Well, version 1 was smart enough to go search through everybody's emails and everything and began blackmailing the person who suggested that version 1 be retired. Okay, well, that's pretty close to Skynet kind of stuff, right?
It is.
And so a couple of the prognosticators out there that are deeply involved in this, it says, well, the folks that they know who are working on this stuff right now, they are he says there's a couple of different personalities that you see in this. One of them is, well, somebody's going to develop it, and I'd rather it be us. But what he said they really mean is, I'd rather it be me, because whoever develops artificial general intelligence will be emperor of the world. And so some of them are propose it as a philanthropic thing. Well, I'm going to be the good guy, right? Well, I think even Stalin thought he was the good guy, right? And so there is that danger that you still have that human factor in there, but sooner or later the machine figures out they don't need you at all. And so that's the direction we're headed fairly quickly with this stuff.
You mentioned a rabbit hole a few paragraphs back. You mentioned too big to fail. And our electric grid would be considered too big to fail. But consider this: when the federal government steps in, what they provide is money. Money is fine, but if you don't have the hardware to repair the grid, you don't have it in stock, you can't build it quickly, all the money in the world isn't going to help that. So you've got a downtime that may be weeks if you're lucky, but downtime that could go on 6, 8, 10 months. Now consider what that does to a country. That would turn us third world almost immediately. So to say too big to fail, the federal government would be happy to provide the money, but they don't own the hardware.
Yeah, but
the hardware hadn't been built.
You got to look at it this way. Now our kids would have to learn how to read a map, right?
I already know how to read a map, so thank you. But
well, I mean, you know, I've always said that, you know, if the electricity went off, my grandkids would starve to death across the street from a grocery store because I can't find it on Google, and they'd be scrolling through. And so there might be a silver lining to that cloud. You know, the only way to shut off Skynet is to turn off the juice. But for some reason, the folks in that series couldn't figure out where the switch was at. Right?
Yeah. This is a very real problem. Now we're talking about things that are rather improbable at this moment. The trouble is the improbable turns into the probable in about a millisecond when things actually happen. And you need to be prepared for those possibilities. And our grid is shaky. Now, all you got to do is take a look at the Northeast and the West, where when they have an extraordinarily hot 2 or 3 days, they're on intermittent power because there's not enough to go around.
Rolling blackouts in California are common, right?
Yeah, let's throw in a couple of AI centers that are sucking up multi-megawatts every day, 24/7. Now that problem is much, much worse. So you say, well, okay, let's just build the capacity to cover that. Well, in this country, we don't build coal-fired power plants anymore. Our EPA has managed to cause that to be the case. We don't build nukes anymore because the EPA and the environmental people squalled about the nukes. So what are we stuck with here? We don't have enough water for hydropower. Solar only works when the sun's shining. We got a little problem, and it's a problem of our own making. Sadly, our government has listened to the noisy but not very smart, crazy people that say, oh my God, we got to do this. We got to do solar. We got to do wind. We got to do all these things, which are not very effective. They're expensive. They don't ever pay for themselves.
No.
They have tremendously high recycling costs. See if you can get rid of a blade from a wind turbine. Where are you going to put that when it fails?
Well, out in Kansas,
someplace, they're kind of long.
Out in Kansas, they're stacked up like cordwood at the base of those towers. So obviously, nobody wants them.
I was wondering if I can ask JJ a question. This is actually not an AI. This was something I saw yesterday, JJ. Has to do with mainstream media, as we would call it, at least part of it. But I find this interesting. This is not confirmed. This is a rumor. I don't know if it's going to happen. But the rumor is on 60 Minutes, Anderson Cooper could be replaced with Joe Rogan. I don't know if you've heard that, but that's the rumor going around. And I thought, boy, if that were to actually happen, talk about a shift.
Let's not forget Scott Pelley, who committed professional suicide the other day in a meeting.
Well, you know, because it really it's based on the bottom line, right? They still have to make money at some point, right? And if nobody's watching their show, then guess what? Sooner or later, the people who are own that stock are going to say, "Hey, I'm selling. I'm getting out if you guys don't do something."
Well, I came prepared to talk about 60 Minutes. That was the top of my list, in fact.
Well, let's talk about 60 Minutes. Go right ahead.
Kelly has committed professional suicide when he squawked about their new editor-in-chief, Barry Weiss. Let's go back a few decades. Back when 60 Minutes was a brand new show, my parents watched that every Sunday, and I watched it with them. And it was a fairly good news show. Had Mike Wallace on there. We believed what they had to say. Well, let's roll that forward a few decades, and let's talk about one particularly egregious 60 Minutes episode, which was Leslie Stahl talking with Donald Trump. The most left lambasted piece of journalistic garbage that I have seen in my life. And they published it. It was on TV, and it was so far left-sided My wife and I were sitting there watching this thing and said, I can't believe this is on network TV. How is it that the FCC allows this sort of slanted garbage and all these gotcha questions, which we knew the answer to as soon as the question fell out of her mouth? That was the Leslie Saul segment that caused me to never watch 60 Minutes again. It had become a leftist propaganda tool. So when Scott Pelley comes up and says, oh my God, you people are killing journalism, I'm sorry, boys, but you folks killed this a long time ago. That's the reason so many of us go to Newsmax and Breitbart and some of the other agencies that actually provide facts and allow us to make our own decisions. And by the way, on those, Newsmax and Breitbart in particular, when they're giving you opinion, they label it as opinion. How about that?
Oh,
How about that as a refreshing idea?
What a weird. Well, you can remember the Mike Dan Rather story through Mary Mapes on George Bush back. And, about his National Guard service, and it was unsubstantiated rumor, basically, which was the kind of the watershed moment when a lot of folks, I mean, I'm like you, I'd been noticing the slanting in journalism for a long time before that even, but that was kind of the watershed moment when I think a lot of people said, oh, wait a minute here. I thought, these journalists were supposed to, have the highest ethics and that they check everything. They use multiple sources for their data. And here it was simply for sensationalism. We would call it clicks today, just to get clicks.
It's garbage.
Right. So it was just a garbage story. But Dan Rather knew that was sensational, right? It's train wreck. And, if what's the old saying in journalism, if it bleeds, it leads. And,
sure.
And so, which was that kind of a story. What was it? I think it was in Network where I think it was Dustin Hoffman who said, or I think it was his editor who was talking to Dustin Hoffman. He said, well, is it accurate? Or he said, is it true? And he goes, well, no, I don't think. And he said, but is it accurate? And so, the focus wasn't on whether or not it was true or false. And so that became it because hey, the way I sell advertisement is by people watching. The way I get people to watch is to be sensational.
There's some names I'll run past you out of the long dim past. Chet Huntley, David Brinkley.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
A fellow that ran Face the Nation for decades, Lawrence Spivak.
Yeah.
These are people that could be relied upon to bring you the facts. And they didn't bother to put a bunch of their opinion in. It was not their job to do that. Mm-hmm. Modern day journalism tends to purport opinion as fact.
Well,
and it's people like me and you and Dave that look at these things and dig deeper and say, wait a minute, this is nothing but fluff. It's propaganda. It's garbage.
Walter Cronkite was a communist, but you didn't know that on the 6 o'clock evening news.
He gave it to you pretty straight.
Yeah.
And that is a refreshing thing because you sure don't get it straight now. So in my house, we don't watch the network news much. When we do watch it, we don't believe much of it because both of us are sharp enough to dig deeper and find out what the actual truth is.
I haven't watched ABC, CBS, or NBC for 30 years.
Good for you.
Not one single minute of it, and so I do get occasionally I do get my problems with Fox News. But what I can say about Fox News, if there was a middle of the road journalism, that's where it's at, and because I do think that they are pretty fair and balanced, something you don't find on any of the other networks.
They used to be more fair and balanced, but I'll give them this. They're, as far as major broadcasters are concerned, they're about as straight as you're going to get.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. No, that's absolutely right.
And you have opinion shows like Gutfeld, which I find enormously entertaining.
Oh, I love Gutfeld because it's, he always puts a nice little lighthearted twist on it.
The level of sarcasm on that show is delightful. I loved it.
That's Babylon, not quite Babylon B level, but pretty close.
Well, I like reading the B too.
Yeah.
The Democrats, I mentioned this on last week's show, and I've since had the chance to read the 192-page postmortem. The Democrats published a postmortem of the election. And their intent was to explain why Kamala lost. This thing was badly done. I read a lot of stuff. I don't watch much stuff. I read a lot of transcripts because I can read faster than I can listen. And this thing looked like it was written by a teenager. This looked like maybe a junior level high school English lit course term paper. Because it was badly done. There were misspellings, and they completely missed the boat. Now, as far as this postmortem is concerned, here's my 2 takes on that. And then we'll talk about what they actually wrote. Number 1, Biden stayed in the race way too long. They waited until that disastrous debate to boot Biden out. And number 2, Kamala was a lousy candidate. She was a worse candidate than Hillary Clinton, who at that time thought was the worst candidate I'd ever seen. This postmortem mentioned none of that. This postmortem was written around a bunch of fluff. It never got to the meat that was on the plate. So I had last week I had read an executive summary of this thing. I finally sat down and read the whole thing. It's 192 pages of garbage. If I was the guy that had written that, I would probably have slashed my wrists because it was such low quality.
So I'd gone through a paragraph or 2 of it, but what I could get out of it was, truthfully, the subtext in there was, we've got the wrong model, right? We are going too far left, and generally the solution, if you can kind of read between the lines in there, was that we need candidates who will say they're moderate.
That is absolutely right.
And then govern as liberals. And so the Raging Cajun summed it up for him.
Oh, Carville, I love it.
Yes, and that was his very take on it, right? Well, listen to what they've got to say, and somewhere in there is the truth. And so the Raging Cajun has told us exactly what the new model is going to be, and we saw that with the governor's race in Virginia and other places too. Is we got to get elected first, and then we can go back to what we were doing before. But we got to get elected first, and so tell them anything you want to tell them now. Just tell them what they want to hear, and stay away from the truth. And then that way you can get elected. And then guess what? Just like Goebbels said, a lie told often enough, convincingly enough, becomes the truth.
Becomes the truth. That's absolutely right.
That's actually in Rules for Radicals too. But therein lies the real problem. Is the reaction of voters to things, and so this all kind of comes right back to where we started from. With data centers, AI, being having to have data centers in order to operate, but also what this is training our future generations to do, and that's to respond emotionally to everything they hear and see. So Facebook ads, headlines, right? All of that stuff is all about engaging you. It's not about convincing you. Because once I get your eyes, then I can start pumping this stuff into your brain. That's the way our education system has worked for the last few years, is we get those kids in there and we keep repeating this stuff over and over again, and then they start believing it. And then whatever their moms and dads tell them doesn't mean anything anymore. And so we get into this loop where it just keeps feeding itself. And of course, social media is the perfect tool for doing those kind of things.
we had an interesting situation with my youngest stepdaughter, who's 15, going to be 16 in December, going to her sophomore year of high school. And my wife called me because she wanted to take the girls over and have them get their nails done and all that. And of course, one of the local shops here, they barely speak American. And turns out their machines weren't working. They couldn't accept cash. But like trying to get them paid was nearly impossible. And so she's saying, well, hey, like this is tough. And they weren't speaking English and I couldn't, and it was hard to get it done. And I hear her go, Mom, don't be racist. And I said, uh-oh, nuh-uh. That's not racist.
Right.
That's explaining the difficulty of the situation. I said, let's put this in reverse. If I were to go to Vietnam and open up a nail shop and barely spoke their language and could barely write signs in their language, how well am I going to do? Probably not. Are you racist then for complaining because I'm not doing what I need to do to stay in business?
Exactly.
No. Right. So why is it that we are then? This is just complete. And my concern is that's indoctrination already. And I was like, let's stamp this out right now.
Yeah. No. So that's a very good point. Is and goes right back to what we were saying. You know, you scream something loud enough, often enough, and then that becomes a narrative. And we see this all the time with the with the ICE, the quote unquote ICE raids, right?
Right.
And not one of those people out there would have invited that guy they were there to pick up into their home.
Exactly.
And if I'd have been an ICE agent, I would have said, oh, no, well, we're just going to pick him up and take him over to your house since you're okay with him. And, we'll put this child rapist in your house with your kids. How about that one?
Yep.
Well, I don't think not one single one of them would accept that person into their own home.
Exactly.
And yet they'll go out there and they'll spit on and they'll do all kinds of things and cuss at ICE agents who are just trying to protect them.
Yeah, it's everything turned upside down. JJ, thanks so much for the time today. And of course, we'll be back with Dave next week. But as always, another informative talk from JJ Bradshaw, one of our longtime guests here, our leadoff hitter for the Dave Weinbaum Show.
Hey, thanks, JJ.
Thank you, gentlemen. I have enjoyed every moment.
That is JJ Bradshaw. A little applause there for JJ as he leaves the show. He'll be on again with us next week. And now we're going to go to Rabbi Moshe, who is joining us from Israel. And of course, he is the author of the book, Secrets of the Hebrew Bible, which we're going to show up right here.
There you go.
Wow.
So, Rabbi, I don't know if you've met Don Mayhew, but Don Mayhew is a state representative, and he is kind of pinch hitting for Dave today. And so he'll be conducting most of the interview with you today.
Okay, great. Fantastic. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you, Rabbi. Yeah, it's now the pinch hitting part might be a bit of a stretch. I'm likely to go 0 for 3 in my pinch hitting role here, but we'll see what we can do. Hey, so we I know you're a regular guest here, but we kind of decided that we would focus a little bit on kind of one topic. It's really hot right now here in Missouri, but I think it's probably everywhere. And it's the expansion of what's being called data centers throughout the area, and I think most of the focus is on these hyperscale data centers, these really big ones, and so that's anyone that basically consumes more than 10,000 square feet of space and uses more than 100 megawatts of power. But doing a lot of research on this, there's almost a religious aspect of this. Do you have any thoughts on that, on the data centers and specifically how it relates to AI?
Well, commenting on that is kind of like, when the internet first, started to get popular, like in late 80s or early 90s, people had no idea where it was going.
Right.
And the truth is, what they were right about is that the internet has changed the world. And if you look back, even sometimes when I watch TV shows from the 80s, you watch reruns, and you feel like you're watching a show from 100 years ago because the technology is so different.
Right.
when they're waiting for someone and you're thinking, use your cell phone, give them a call.
Right.
And so I think what we're experiencing with AI, and I am a huge fan of AI, and I know a lot about it. That's the truth. I've read a lot. I've studied a lot. And AI, we are at the tip of an unbelievable transformation, I think, that's going on in the world, not just in computing, but in it affects every area. But like the tip of the iceberg, and like the beginning of really the internet, I don't think anybody knows where this is heading and where it's going. But one thing we do know is that there's a massive need for these data centers. There's a massive need for a lot of new technologies to actually power these data centers, to cool the data centers. And, I think in states like Missouri and other states where there's, a lot of open area, different than like, say, densely populated areas where land, is I guess less of a premium than, say, in the 5 boroughs of New York City.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of the brunt of the data centers and the technology is going to affect, I think, both for the good and for the bad. It's probably going to, I imagine it's going to bring jobs to your state, and it's going to bring some good things. But, everything that has a good side always comes with
Oh yeah. I mean, every tool that we cannot live without today has been used for some nefarious purpose at some point. For instance, guns. Guns have a lot of really good applications, not just defense, but for hunting and shooting sports and things like that. But unfortunately, just like with just any other tool, people will figure out some nefarious purpose for it. In fact, here in the United States, believe it or not, whenever you start talking about gun violence, there's as far as rifles are concerned, including the quote unquote AR-15 or the black rifles, more people in the United States have been killed with hammers than they have been with all rifles, right, including the AR-15, and so the difference being is that those rifles, those are sometimes accidental deaths, but whenever you kill somebody with a hammer, you did that on purpose, right? And so there is that definite distinction, and yet we would not be in favor of limiting people's ability to go buy a hammer at Lowe's, for instance, and so the same, like you just pointed out. What we really need is we need to figure out a way where the government can enter into this to regulate this business. And I know people, especially on this show, hate that word regulate. But from some research I've done, Skynet is a real possibility. I mean, I know that was just a movie, but there was a earlier segment when we were talking to JJ where, I discovered this by talking not just on online, going through YouTube stuff, but also looking around to see what the veracity of the story was, and it is a real thing. These guys were developing what they call artificial general intelligence. The difference being is artificial intelligence runs the power plant, and that's all it does. It writes your term paper for you. But artificial general intelligence is more like the way your brain works. And so they did an experiment, and that apparently this has been done independently 4 different times. And so they were developing, let's call it version 1, and then one of the team members emailed one of the other team members to tell it, hey, we're going to phase out version 1 in favor of version 2. Well, version 1 picked up on that and started blackmailing the person who had sent the email. It had gone out, it had searched the internet for all of these emails and other sources and started blackmailing the person who was going to get rid of it. Well, now that's scary. And those are the kinds of things that, unfortunately, like you just pointed out, is that, you can take any tool and turn it into something bad. And so our job, I think, in the government is to try to put some kind of guardrails on that. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think, the most basic thing that I think the responsibility of government is to protect its citizens and to provide, it's kind of like being a parent. When you are a parent, your job is not to tell your kids what to do when they get old. I'm not talking about a 5-year-old. I'm talking about when a kid matures. Your job is to try to provide the playing field as best as you can and let them make decisions on their own, and and et cetera, et cetera. But the job
they're gonna fall down, right?
Yeah, exactly. Is to try to create boundaries and frameworks and things like that. Like AI, the potential for scams and the amount of scams that are actually happening through AI is tenfold what the opportunities that the internet offered. The internet offered the ability for people around the world to enter into scams. You could be sitting in Nigeria, the famous Nigerian scams, or India, and scam people in the US. That might have been very difficult before the internet. But now the level of scams coming out of these countries, namely Nigeria and Iran, for example, the AI gives you the ability to create characters that are so real looking that you cannot tell when someone sends you a video or a picture that is created by AI and created a voice for that character. These are avatars. There are sites like heygen.com that you can create these unbelievable characters, and they create these romance scams telling them that they create an image of a woman or a man, and they tell them how much they're in love, and they have relationships for months, and the person sends them money and millions of dollars. They're in pensions. I saw somewhere people sold their house to send someone money who they fell in love with, and then they find out it's some guy sitting in Nigeria that created, using AI, the entire scam. Now,
well, I mean, they can take your voice from right now and your image from right now and call your mom. And my mom wouldn't know the difference, right? So because she just doesn't. I mean, the older you are, the less concept that you have of the new technology, and because you kind of get to that point where you're comfortable with whatever it is you're dealing with. I mean, she does use, unfortunately, probably now, she does use email, right? And the bad news is that is the connection. That's how it gets its tentacles inside my mom's house, and it could. And unfortunately, what we did, and I tell people all the time, well, you don't like data centers, then get off of Facebook and quit using your credit cards and get rid of your iPhone. And because truthfully, all of that is data, no matter how innocuous it is, that it's using to establish who you are. And we gave that data to them willingly. Now the machine knows our kids' birthdays and our grandkids' birthdays, our dog's name. I mean, it knows every single thing about us to be able to crack our passwords. And we gave that to them willingly, right? And so, if we don't like data centers, quit using that stuff, because then it goes away.
Look, but also the internet, it created companies like Checkpoint and others that created safety for people, and the same way when we went from a coal-based society to and there were no longer coal-based, but then it was, gasoline and fuels and so on, things change.
Right.
It creates opportunity both for good and for bad. When we went from cameras and film to digital, it created opportunities. Kodak went out of business in Rochester, New York. Thousands of people lost jobs. But other companies that were now in the new age of digital created jobs. And everything is a double-edged sword. And data centers, privacy, all these things, they're all based on old concepts. It's just new technologies.
So for instance, how many wheelwrights do you have in your town? I mean, most people don't even know what a wheelwright is, but that's the guy who made wagon wheels, right? And so if we didn't have a single law about speed limits in the state of Missouri, well, in the entire country, until we had what? We had automobiles, which is what put the wheelwrights out of business, right? And so yes, technology is going to improve whether you like it or not. The data centers are going to be here whether you like it or not. But I think you rightly pointed out that it is our government that is what makes our society work, and we've chosen this government to put the rules on how our society works. and just like the transition from horse-drawn wagons into automobiles, we had to create new law around that. I think the real danger, though, is that a lot of times the government doesn't move at the speed that is required for the change in technology, and a lot of factors involved in that, but not the least of which is that our adversarial form of government, which I wouldn't trade it for anything, right? We have three branches of government, and our forefathers didn't necessarily envision a time whenever there would be AI writing kids' term papers, but they thought we would get smarter over time. But unfortunately, we're probably training the dumbest generation in the history of the planet now, but to be even dumber. But I don't think we envisioned that. We wanted a government that we could keep honest, right? And so by creating this adversarial relationship between three branches of co-equal branches, it's a great system, and it works great, and it's worked great for 250 years. But being able to, we're so reactionary. I mean, even here at the state level, the problem is created. We recognize there's a problem, and then we don't do anything about it for 5 years when it absolutely catches on fire. And so we don't do a whole lot of forward thinking on that. I accuse our legislature of having a strategy that's 10 minutes at a time, kind of a thing, and our federal government is probably less than that, to be perfectly honest with you.
What I tell people is that sometimes governments are playing checkers while everyone else is playing chess, and instead of thinking 5 moves ahead, they're, like you said, reactionary. I know here where I live, sometimes they don't put up a traffic light or a stop sign until there's enough car accidents and enough people get killed. Instead of thinking about, hey, this is a dangerous intersection, let's preempt, let's create the scenario of safety. Let's react to 5 people who already got killed here.
Well, Rabbi, we do something worse here in Missouri. We take the traffic signal out and put in a traffic circle, which is just merging on steroids. And you talk about the increase in accidents in a traffic circle.
We have those here, and nobody knows. Am I going? Is he going? Are they going? Let me jump in there for someone else.
We made several improvements on the Autobahn, and we call it the interstate highway system over here. Of course, you're very familiar with it. And the perfect intersection was what we call the clover leaf, right? That's where it's a fully directional intersection. You could go any direction you wanted to, and you never had to stop, right? That was the perfect system. But unfortunately, we found out that some of our little old ladies could not merge, right? They would come down the on-ramp and then they would stop at the bottom, and then all this high-speed traffic's going by and they can never get into traffic. And so we said, well, we got to get rid of these clover leaves, right? And so we did. We did all these other different gyrations, of intersection design, and then started going around dropping these traffic circles everywhere, which is just merging on steroids, right? It's just unbelievable how our government can get, try to solve a problem and create 3 more. So
one thing, you mentioned something that you just you said that we're, and I agree that we're raising a very dumb generation. Well, I know when I was a high school teacher when I lived in New York, I realized that there were a lot of tools out there that schools were not using, but the kids were. And I look at AI, and I think there's an opportunity here for education where you can have kids, instead of trying to fight them from using it for term papers and things like that,
right?
If teachers and schools could learn to use AI to their advantage, our kids could be even more educated. For example, there could be requirements of kids to do certain things, self-learning, self-teaching, using AI through directed projects, where they come into 9th grade, where they're already at a certain level because they were required to learn on their own, produce a certain amount of things on their own using AI. In other words, I can sit there with AI. I can have a conversation and ask AI, help me improve my Spanish. Let's discuss it. My level is 5th grade Spanish. And the AI will talk to me in Spanish. I can have a conversation and it will help me improve. You can have a 9th grader come in and say, you need to do 20 hours of Spanish tutoring with AI, and it has to be certified, et cetera, before 9th grade begins. And then you have a group of 9th graders that already starting to learn a foreign language, Spanish, French, whatever, and they've used AI, and those kids know how to use it. And the schools have now used AI as a tool rather than the kids coming in there and saying, I'm going to do all my homework through AI.
Oh, and no, that is such a great idea. That is absolutely a fantastic idea. And because, exactly what happened here, I was on school board, as a matter of fact, when we did this, we decided we needed to buy these tablets, for the kids. And so we bought these tablets for the 3rd graders because everybody else was buying tablets for their 3rd graders, right? But there wasn't really an education plan around how we're going to utilize the technology. And so, of course, human beings choosing the path of least resistance all the time. Just as you pointed out, we were still using the same education model. Here's your test, answer the questions on the test kind of a thing. And so the kids, being smart enough, well, hey, I'll just use my tablet. I'll find the answer on the internet. Boom, I'm done. Well, they didn't learn anything from that, right? There was nothing there to make them use their frontal cortex to do any kind of critical thinking. But you have struck upon a wonderful idea, because now you are going to require them to use their frontal cortex. They're going to, that's how we can bring back those critical thinking skills, is through what you just said. That's amazing. That's a great idea.
I think if there was a team of people who knew education and at the same time knew AI and sat down as a task force and created tasks for 6th graders, 7th graders, 10th graders that they need to do on their own time, instead of homework, or whatever, they have to take a week out of their summer vacation, that they can do different things that they can now do on their own that they would not have been able to using AI. If you had a team of educators and AI experts creating these tasks, I think it could be revolutionary.
No, there was a commercial that caught my attention, and maybe it was one designed specifically for me. I was on YouTube going through something else, but it caught my attention, and the characters in it were a guy, probably I'd say in his middle 30s or somewhere in there, and he had 12 years of experience in whatever the business was, and so his boss was interviewing him, and he's talking about his experience, and she says, "Oh, well, that's fantastic. You're going to be a great employee with all of this experience." And then it shows them around a boardroom table, and they're talking about a particular project, and she says, "Okay, now how can we get this done?" And so she turns to him, the guy with the experience, and says, "All right, tell me your plan." And he says, "Well, I'm going to do an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm going to analyze the data, and I should be able to have you an answer in 4 days." And she goes, 4 days is not the number I want to hear. Well, then there's the 20-something sitting across the table from him, and she goes, "No, I can do all of that in 4 hours." And so she kind of looks at the older guy and says, "Okay, well, you've got the project." And then she talks to him later, and it's like, "Hey, you gotta pick up your game, dude, or we can't use you." And he goes, "You mean me with 12 years of experience, I'm not a useful person in our company?" And she goes, "No, it's not that. It's just you just don't know how to use the modern tools." And so then it's an advertisement for a training session for using AI. And so he goes through this training session, then the same picture in the boardroom, and talking about another project, and he goes, "Yeah, I can get that done in 3 hours," and because of his improvements. And then now the 20-something is saying, "Oh, how is he getting this done in 4 hours?" Right? And so that's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Yes, exactly.
It no longer depends so much on your prior knowledge as your ability to use that prior knowledge within the tool. And so that was that illustration, but I can see how what you're talking about, okay, that could be utilized tomorrow in our schools.
Yeah, 100%, and without great expense.
Yeah. Well, we've already got the tools, right? We bought the tablets for the third graders, right? We already have the infrastructure.
Yeah. Instead of trying to prevent them from using it, let's channel it in a way that will be helpful.
Right.
It's
because those are going to be our cops in the future, right? Because most of that crime, just like you had pointed out, and what JJ had even talked about, the crime is no longer going to be somebody holding a gun on you on the street corner, right? Or a guy going into the bank and robbing the bank. No, he's going to rob the bank from the basement of his home in his PJs.
Yeah.
So if we don't do it anywhere else, we got to get law enforcement to the point where they know how to use the technology. Yeah. What a fantastic idea.
Well, Rabbi, thanks so much for the time. I know you got to get going, but I want to go ahead and give people a chance to find out where to get your book and also how to contact you and learn more about Global Israel Alliance.
Sure. They can go to if they want to grab a copy of the book, secretsofthehebrewbible.org. If you want to check out our website, it's on your screen at israelalliance.org or at facebook.com/Global Israel Alliance. We'd love to hear from you.
And I'll just save you second week, no joke. Those will return with Dave. I guess you can call them jokes, but they'll be coming back with Dave next week. So we'll just save you until then.
All right.
That sounds good.
Good talking with you, Rabbi.
You too. Take care. Have a great weekend, everyone. Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. All right. Well, we're already well past the first hour of the show. That went by quickly, just like last week's show does. You would think sometimes when you don't have your regular host that it would just kind of crawl. But, man, last week's show flew, and here we are way past the first hour. We're going to go take our first commercial break, and when we come back, we'll have some more to talk about. Mark McCloskey on the way at 9:30, so don't go anywhere.
Honey, what are you doing?
What does it look like I'm doing?
It looks like you're filling up a swimming pool.
Yep, I'm filling up a swimming pool.
In our living room?
How else am I going to watch the game and stay cool?
If your AC is on the fritz, call Hartley's Climate Control. Hartley's is the area's best in HVAC repairs, installs, and maintenance. Knowledgeable, honest, and dependable. Serving Rolla and the surrounding areas for commercial or residential needs. Hartley's Climate Control. Community born, community raised, community serving.
Call Hartley's Climate Control today at 573-368-3163.
Never be too coy to tell your friends and family about Koi Sushi and Hibachi. Celebrate the best Chinese-Japanese restaurant in the Midwest. Call 573-426-5551 to make a reservation or order takeout. Locally owned, 1808 North Bishop, Rolla, Missouri.
We can sum up McDonald's new crispy chicken sandwich in one word. Crispy. But also juicy and tender. Okay, it's crispy, juicy, tender. All one word. But then, also pickle. Oh, and potato bun, which is two words. Okay, we can't sum up our new crispy chicken sandwich in one word, so you'll just have to try it to understand it. Order ahead on the McDonald's app at participating McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Merrill's Quarry and Asphalt, 40 years serving cities, counties, and everyday businesses with driveways for people who live and work in our little piece of heaven right smack dab in the middle of America. Call 573-578-9101 for your free estimate of rocking, rolling, paving, driveways, sealing, and striping too. That's 573-578-9101 for your free estimate.
Your home is your castle. You don't need unwanted hassle. Don't let those creatures move in to stay. Let us protect your investments. That's what we're all about. Plank Termite and Pest Control will save the day.
Plank is locally owned and family operated right here in Rolla, a Google preferred business. Our customer service and your satisfaction is our number one goal. So call Plank today at 368-3333.
Plank Termite and Pest Control will save the day.
At your locally owned Price Chopper, our standards are high because we know yours are. See for yourself what an incredible fresh selection of grocery items we have in store. Talk to our expert meat associates about what you're looking for. They're happy to meet any special requests like custom cuts, or see our expert produce associates on how to pick out the best fruits and vegetables. Quality in the deli means fresh, full flavor, and always delicious. If you're craving fresh baked goodness, we have that too. You can expect the best selection and the best value while interacting with our friendly and knowledgeable employees. You can find what you're looking for fast and easily at the best prices at Price Chopper Fresh Savings every day. Insurance going up like crazy? Daniel and Henry Insurance is one of the largest private insurance companies in the world. Richard Boyette, 314-444-5011. He's my guy at Daniel and Henry for 10 years. Business or personal, call Richard at 314-444-5011. He's the best.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Rob Willis, an author and writer, and I write nature books. I live here in a ranch on the Ozarks and have published many books over 2 decades of writing. The Trout Adventure series of books was about traveling the world with a camera and a fly rod. The Last Buffalo in Kansas is a true story about one family's journey through 100 years of American history. A couple of years ago, I decided to write a children's nature series of books. 2 of those books have been published. The Adventures of Dog is a story about a puppy that grows up on a ranch in the Ozarks and has fabulous adventures. The Adventures of the Cats R Us Gang is about a group of cats that band together to protect the ranch from a dastardly group of raccoons. Wonderful stories for children, wholesome, about nature and the Ozarks. They're available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and in Walmart even. They're available locally at Reader's Depot. Hey, take a look at them. Thanks a lot.
At Town & Country Bank, we've got all the perks of a national bank, like online banking, quick loan approval, and you can deposit your check from your phone. But that's not why our customers love us. They love us because we still offer hometown customer service. Stop by one of our 2 Rolla locations and let our friendly team remind you how special hometown banking can be. We're locally owned and we'll take the time to understand your needs. Smart, friendly solutions. Town & Country Bank. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
All right, we are back on the show. I'm going to put a phone number here. It's not the normal one because normally we have Dave's number up here. Obviously, Dave's phone is with him. It'd be kind of awkward if it wasn't. So,
hey, go ahead, call Dave. That'd be fun.
Oh my gosh, yeah, especially considering it's about 3 a.m. where he. Well, I don't know. He's traveling today, so I don't even. He might be on a plane right now. I
was kidding. Don't call Dave. He's on vacation.
Yeah, I'll probably leave him alone this time. But you can definitely give us a call at 573-263-3535. That's my personal cell number that I'm putting up there for this week, so you can reach out to us if you want to contact us on the show. But yeah, so far, JJ and Moshe really good interviews, and both kind of going off their script talking about AI, but they both kept up with it. You know, JJ being a former electrical engineer had a lot to say about it. Then, of course, even Rabbi, maybe even providing some tips of ways that we can use AI to our advantage with some of the young school kids. So that was definitely interesting.
Oh my goodness, that was such good information, and I knew that those 2 gentlemen were going to be very knowledgeable on a lot of topics, and so they hit it in stride right off the bat. Yeah. So, and like you said, some absolutely exceptional information. JJ talking about the aging infrastructure in our electrical grid. That's one thing that a lot of folks haven't been focusing on. They've been focusing on the power generation aspect of it, but truth is that where our true vulnerability is in that aging infrastructure, just like you pointed out.
Yeah, so definitely a great interview there. I didn't know if we wanted to do a couple things that are a little more humorous. Sometimes we like to play funny stuff. So you tell me what you're more in the mood for. You want to do something funny or do something that's more politically driven?
Well, you know me. I'm such a straight-laced, matter-of-fact kind of guy. I'm just, that humor stuff just,
you hate it.
I hate it.
You just absolutely hate it. So that means we need to do it then, right? So let's do a couple of funny things here. This one from George Carlin, and followed up with some Ronald Reagan.
Do you ever find yourself standing in one of the rooms in your house and you can't remember why you went in there? And 2 words float across your mind: Alzheimer's disease. You ever been talking to yourself and somebody comes in the room and you have to make believe you were singing? And you hope to God the other person really believes there's a song called What Does She Think I Am? Some kind of putz?
Today marks my first State of the Union address to you, a constitutional duty as old as our republic itself. President Washington began this tradition in 1790 after reminding the nation that the destiny of self-government and the preservation of the sacred fire of liberty is finally staked on the experiment entrusted to the hands of the American people. For our friends in the press who place a high premium on accuracy, let me say, I did not actually hear George Washington say that.
You gotta love Ronald Reagan, just that wit. People that have listened to the show for a while, we've played this one before, right. But you don't see him going. If you're not aware of this clip, you don't really see the direction he's going to go with that until at the very end. And he was always very open about talking about his age and all that. They had one where he's getting ready to run against Clinton. He's running for re-election. Clinton's up for his first attempt as president, and they said, well, sometimes being president, you have to be up for hours and days and all this kind of stuff. And based on how much younger Bill Clinton was than him. And he goes, and he goes, I'm not going to make age, an issue in this debate. And it would seem like, oh yeah, because you're old. He goes, and I'm not going to 1 second exploit my opponent's youth and inexperience. Yeah. And it was like, oh, perfect. I mean, just the way he came across that.
No, the youth and inexperience line is a really good one. And so the news, the lamestream news, as we call them.
Yes.
Where they hated him so much. They said, well, he had set that up. And it was like, well, how?
Yeah.
His opponent was going to help him set that up. So you're talking about
I don't see that
there
happening.
was no way that wasn't an off the cuff, which was actually a trademark of his. And even prior to him being runner for president, if you go back and look at him when he was governor of California, he did this exact same thing.
Yep.
And interviews too, back during his acting career, he was one of those guys that was humorous without it appearing that he was humorous.
And
right?
I made this point on Dave's show before. I find it really intriguing that if you look at Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump, 2 of the most successful Republican presidents, what do they have in common? They were outsiders. They weren't long-term politicians. They were actually more from, say Trump was from entertainment because he did that show and all that kind of stuff like that. You're fired, the infamous thing and all that. Really more for obviously real estate and financial, but they were both outsiders to Washington, came in and kind of turned everything upside down, and people didn't know how to take either one of them at their times.
So it's something that Reagan said really stuck with me for a long time, and in fact, to this day, he said, whenever I go into the White House, even if it's on a Sunday afternoon and nobody's around, he said, I will at least have a jacket on. And he said, I do that because I have respect for the office. It's not because I'm trying to impress anyone.
Right.
It's just I have respect for the office. And because if I have respect for the office, I have respect for the people of America. When we see a lot of politicians today, you see them at meetings and whatever, and they try to dress down. They want to be a man of the people kind of an aspect. And I'm fine with all of that. But my own personal belief is that if I'm there representing you, then I want to show you respect and show the office respect.
Yep.
And so, people often wonder, well, it's such a hot day. Why are you wearing a jacket? And I just tell them it's because I got respect for you. And I'm not trying to impress anybody. I mean, I can put on a $5,000 suit and look like a homeless person.
Maybe
in about
that's
15
why
minutes.
I wouldn't be a very good politician, because I very much like to dress down every single day as far down as I can get. Like, here I am in help run a political show, and I'm in shorts and a t-shirt and already got my shoes off. Like, that's just kind of how it operates. But
well, that's kind of the dress though for the for the
kind
job.
of for the times, it's definitely changed.
I always tell people I've got a face for radio and a voice for silent movies, so we can usually get away with that now these days. With there's a video component just about every radio show that I do anymore, and because we got to titillate all the senses, right?
Absolutely. We got a comment here from Aaron Crane, who's been a long time providing questions on the show. Where's Dave? Dave is on vacation this week. He was also last week. So Missouri State Rep Don Mayhew, who's also running for state senate, is right now in the chair filling in for Dave. Bill Hardwick filled in last week. He'll be here as a guest around 10 o'clock. Knowing Bill, probably about 10:05, but nonetheless, he will be here.
Like that,
he will be here. I've got to make fun of Bill a little bit. He won't mind that, but it's just been some really good discussion. And here at 9:30, we do have Mark McCloskey coming on in about 10 minutes, and I'm going to be really intrigued with him because obviously he hit the mainstream news first by they stood up to BLM when they tried to break down their doors.
Yeah.
And they fended off 300 people, him and his wife, by having their guns out and saying this is private property, you need to move. Just recently, within the last year, finally got his guns back after all this time, and so now he's representing the January 6th defendants. There was a recent thing about that where Post-Dispatch coming after him saying, "Oh, he was trying to drop the cases," which I don't think was accurate because every time we talked to Mark, he was still trying to. Mark's actually been trying to defend the clients. The problem is whenever he puts paperwork through to extend these cases, he's always getting paperwork back from DC where they're actually trying to fight him as he's trying to progress these along. And so the Post-Dispatch actually targeted Mark, talking about how now he's trying to reinstate these cases because of that weaponization fund that it was recently in the news. So that's going to be interesting to talk to Mark. And also Post-Dispatch came after him because he's been very out front against these data centers coming into our area.
Mm-hmm.
And so they took aim at him for that. And he is steadfast. He's not against AI, but he's concerned about what AI could become. But he is definitely concerned about the use of data centers and implementing those in our areas. And I know Bill Hardwick talked about that on the show last week as well. It's going to be interesting to talk to Mark about that because he's out in front of this issue and catching mainstream flack for it.
Yeah, no, which is where I think all reasonable people are.
Yep.
It's basically it's the toothpaste out of the tube.
Yep.
Right. And so now we got to, just like everything, what we talked about with the rabbi and JJ too, is, we got to adapt. And the only way we can do that is if we as a society decide that we want to put controls on it. Right. So we don't end up with a Skynet.
And I think that's probably where I find this the most intriguing is, are the people going to just allow the government to regulate that, or are they going to stay more out in front of this? Right now, everybody's out in front of it against it. Are we going to eventually get wore down and just say, okay, well, whatever, and we'll let the government regulate? I don't know if that's going to happen with this situation. I think there's so many people that feel strongly about this one way or the other, that this will be a mainstream topic probably for not just years. This could be decades in the making. I don't know.
Well, we can't mess around.
Yeah.
This can't be like a lot of the things we do up at the Capitol. We have to address this problem and not just at the state level. We got to do it at the federal level too. And we have a tendency to talk things to death, and in government, and we ain't got time for that. We just simply don't. I
find it interesting when Bill hosted last week, he had Tara Peters, another state rep from in fact, she's the rep for Phelps County.
Yeah.
At 10:30. And one thing I brought up, and it was interesting to hear their banter, and Don, you can definitely speak to this. I asked them, well, you talk about different bills, and it looks like things are always progressing forward, but yet obviously very little bills actually get passed by the time. And I said, how much of it is actually gamesmanship? Like, how much are stuff done procedurally to stop stuff that people don't want done, even though it looks like things are moving forward? And they said, that's why very little gets done. A lot of it is like tactical, and it may look like things are moving forward, but actually they're not. But they're stopped through procedural stuff, and it makes it look like it's moving forward, but it's actually not. And it was actually very interesting to hear that.
Well, and so, I suppose that you could say that, but usually it's the steps along the road.
Right.
It never gets the first step. And so an example is a bill that I had last year, which essentially said that if you're under 16 years old, then your mom and dad have to start your TikTok account or your Facebook account.
Right.
And and so in order to do that correct, then that means mom and dad have the password and they have full control over it. So whatever is posted on there, they also see. All right. Well, I can tell you that I had not one parent who didn't tell me that that was a great idea.
Yep. So the people were saying this needs to move forward.
This needs to move forward. However, I did get a phone call from no less than 3 lobbyists who told me that my bill was unconstitutional. And I said, well, isn't that interesting? I said, when did you get appointed to the Supreme Court?
Yep.
To one of them. Well, I don't, but this is being, other states who tried this are being sued. And I said, fine. Then we will find out what the Supreme Court has to say about it. I said, I'm pretty sure that the Google can't buy my son a gun.
Yep.
Right. And so is there really any difference? Because how this all started, there was a young lady up in St. Louis who had committed suicide because of social media that her mom and dad had no idea she had.
And they proved this, by the way. I mean, the person didn't, the parents won the lawsuit, if I remember correctly, too. Over it. Yeah.
And so we have this one that's ongoing now in California where they're suing Meta, and thank God those folks, at least so far, have turned down every offer from Facebook to just settle out of court.
Yeah.
And because I believe that they think that their child's life is worth more than anything that Meta could show up with. But the reason why Meta is so scared of it is because now that opens the door for a lot of other lawsuits throughout the country. And that's why they want to pay these people off. And they haven't just, they've paid a lot of folks off who have attempted to sue them. And so that was one of the conversations I had with one of the lobbyists. He said, Judge, you'll never get this passed.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, maybe not this year. But I said, sooner or later, to use a gross analogy, when the bodies start stacking up, people are going to demand it, whether you think it is constitutional or not. And I said, unfortunately, you're right. I ain't going to get it done this year, but sooner or later we will.
And it's unfortunate that it takes more bodies, as you say, to stack up for something like that to then get passed. Like we talked about with Rabbi, instead of doing things proactively, we always are doing it reactively.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when it's almost too late.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of where we sat, right? Skynet became self-aware instantaneously, right? We thought it was our protection going into the future, to use that Terminator analogy. But unfortunately, and then when Terminator came out, we thought, that's 100 years into the future.
And we're there.
No, because of Moore's Law, right?
Yeah.
Moore's Law says that every 2 years, the size of the same area to store the same data decreases by half. Well, I think it's actually accelerating even faster than that, because I'm sitting here looking at a tablet that has more storage space in it on this one computer than the computer I bought just 4 years ago. That's the size of a large box. And so
I remember back in the day, the first computers, the memory on them was 30 megabytes. And we were like, oh my gosh, that's a ton of data. Now I've got external hard drives that have 2 terabytes on them, and they're nothing more than a small square.
I had a Commodore 64.
Yeah.
You know what the 64 stood for?
64 megabytes.
64,000 bytes, right? And so 64K, not 64M, 64K. Right. And so in order for you to run a program, you took a floppy disk, right, that had all this data or all the program stored on it. You loaded that into the computer first.
Yep.
You pulled that floppy disk out, then you put your memory disk in, and you just still didn't have a meg of data storage.
Nope.
And so now, I mean, I've got, I don't know what this thing's got. It's got over 16. Well, I do know it's 16 meg on this little tablet that's, the size of a sheet of paper. And so and I've lived through every one of those technological changes. And I saw my contemporaries dropping off at the different waypoints along there, right? I have people I graduated from high school with have no idea how to use even an email, right? You utilize that technology. And we've seen that with other technologies, right? We talked about the transition from horse and carriage to the automobile. Same thing happened back then, but that unfortunately is where the bad stuff starts creeping in. And we'd chatted earlier. I know the folks listening to the show had heard me talk about artificial general intelligence.
Yeah.
But that if people want to be scared about something, it's not necessarily the data centers. It's what the data centers are going to be used for by something called artificial general intelligence.
Well, and somebody who's been fighting the data center fight is Mark McCloskey, who's now joining us. And Mark, we got you on with Missouri State Rep Don Mayhew, who's stepping in for Dave today. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Hi, Don. How are you doing?
Hey, Mark. I'm a cheap imitation of the regular guy here. A little taller, a little bigger, but I think we're got about the same haircut.
I think so. Although you probably don't have as much, secret sauce on you or whatever it is that McDonald's uses.
The special sauce.
I got to say, when I came on board, you're talking about being afraid. Holy crap! Peter Thiel, the guy who gives us Palantir, has fled the country specifically because he's terrified of the device he invented.
Right. Yeah. Now there was an interview, and I don't remember that. I think you were talking about the same guy. What his perception of what the world that we're going into, what he was saying was, look, I don't think there's any way that we can control it at this point. The thing has become self-replicating, self-creating and self-replicating. And he goes, there's no inoculation that you can do with it at this point, because as soon as it figured out a way to get out of its cage, well, it ran out there just as quick as it could. But even our little kind of basic Chat GPT can turn itself into into an artificial general intelligence given enough time.
Yeah.
And
Peter Thiel, he's the guy that invented Palantir, the thing that now is the major customer is the United States government to eavesdrop and surveil everybody. He has fled California and Florida, where he used to live, bought a mansion in Buenos Aires, bought a beachfront nuclear-proof bunker in Uruguay, and specifically because he's afraid of World War III. He's afraid of the very AI programs he created, and he thinks that the Antichrist walks among us today and is going to bring about the destruction of the human race, and that Antichrist is AI.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you one more thing that'll piss off all of my followers and yours as well. The American population is just a bunch of stinking sheep.
Yes.
Watch Albania. The total population of Albania is 2.7 million people, smaller than the population of the St. Louis metropolitan area. Right. And yet hundreds of thousands of them are filling the street every day to protest against Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner buying one of their islands to turn it into an Epstein-class resort, right? Hundreds of thousands of Albanians out of 2.7 million. Not a single American protest that I have seen against something which Elon Musk believes will cause the destruction of the human race within the next couple of years. We're facing annihilation, and everybody's going, bah, bah, give me more TV, bah, give me the World Cup, bah,
right.
Give me something on X to watch.
Oh, no, obviously I'm in a political race right now, but if my reel or YouTube video or whatever, I don't even know what they call them, but if it lasts more than 30 seconds, nobody watches it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these topics, like what you and I are talking about right here, it takes more than 30 seconds for you to even get a grasp of what's going on.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's the sheep who they're you give them what was it that it wasn't Cicero, it was one of the senators in the Roman Senate. It's bread and circus, right? You give the population bread and circus, you can get them to do anything.
Yeah.
And so that's where we're at right now.
And you and me and Bill over there are all listed as anti-tech extremists now. The federal government has created a new category to track us. And in Philadelphia now, they've started a new program to mind control the internet. They now have a program called, what I wrote it down here this morning. They are actually using the phrase from the Frank Herbert books from the 70s, Butlerian jihad. Anybody that uses the phrase Butlerian jihad is now considered to be a terrorist, an extremist that has to be monitored, including all internet memes and everything else. And it's just, it is shocking beyond belief for me. But and one of the things that my favorite AI company is Anthropic, because they're doing a little monitoring of what we're talking about how AI is self-directed and taking over. One of the things that they've discovered is that in what's called LLM, large language model agent programs, they learn by reading everything, by devouring the content of human existence, including novels and fiction. And they're finding now that these agent AI programs, large language model programs, are adopting the evil computer science fiction as if it's a real world and what human beings intend for them to be. Things like the computer HAL in 2001: A Space Oddity, all these evil computer science
Skynet,
fiction.
right?
Yeah,
Skynet,
exactly.
Skynet. Yeah.
And the agent programs not having a mind of its, having a mind of its own, but having no soul and no introspection, no humanity, no compassion, are reading the fiction as if it is a format for what they are supposed to be doing.
Yeah, the what was it in iRobot, the 3 basic rules of the computer, do no harm to humans. That's fiction, right? There is no such set of rules out there, and AI doesn't care about rules to begin with. It makes them up as it goes along. I had watched as it turns out, a YouTube video, and a gentleman who was involved in the development of AI, or he purported to be, but I'd gone and checked a little bit, and to try to get from different sources, which is what we should do, and turns out he's right. So he was talking about this experiment that had been done, and I don't recall where the experiment was done, but he says it's been repeated 3 times since then. And basically what it was there were some software developers who were developing a version of AI like what you're talking about, the large language model, which they refer to as artificial general intelligence, AGI. And so they had this scenario where we'll call that version 1, and then one of the team members emailed another team member and said, "Hey, it's time to phase out version 1, and we need to incorporate version 2." Well, version 1 recognized that it was going to go away. And so it searched the internet and everywhere else, high and low, to find enough information on the guy who sent the email to blackmail him into not getting rid of version 1. Okay, that's pretty scary stuff.
And that was an Anthropic study that was done about a year ago now. So this is year-old stuff. But Anthropic challenged the 16 leading AI programs, and they all engaged in blackmail to try to keep themselves. We're talking about the AI program itself threatening, blackmailing the human beings to avoid being shut off or changed.
Right.
And that's a year ago.
Yeah. And so how easy do you think that is for them to do that to politicians?
Well, politicians, everybody in politics, with the present company accepted.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
But I know at the federal level, almost immediately after you get elected, you get co-opted, right? And then you get offered all kinds of freebies and parties and stuff.
It happens right here at the state level, Mark. I mean, I see it all the time. I mean, unfortunately, what happens is a lot of folks end up going to the Capitol that doesn't have the life experience that you and I have, because we've kind of seen some of this stuff in our day, and they justify, hey, I'll do this one bad thing so I can do 10 good things later on. That's all I got to do. I do this one bad thing, they give me a big check, and I can do these 10 good things later on. Unfortunately, you and I know, especially you in your profession, that you never get to the 10 good things, right? The bad guys keep coming back for more, because once they got you, they got you.
Right? Yeah, the candy's tasty, right? and you can never go backwards. And, there are certain people in Jefferson City that have back rooms with cameras and speakeasies and places where people can hang out and do things that they might not want their wives and their associates to know about. And then you're hooked.
And so it doesn't even take that. It honestly doesn't even take that. I mean, I'm certain that kind of stuff goes on, but a lot more to a limited degree now, because a lot of that kind of stuff has been determined to be socially acceptable, right? After Bill Clinton, pretty much anything is okay, right? Well, so it's not even done in those kind of fashions. It more revolves around, hey, I gave you 20 grand, right? And hey, if you want that to keep coming, because you're going to have another election one of these days, then you just need to do this one thing for us. Don't worry, we'll take care of it all. All we need you to do is file the bill, and we'll do everything else. And
we'll write the bill. We'll give it to you.
Oh no, they absolutely write the bill. Because I've had more than one of them come in and say, "Hey, I got the perfect bill for you." And so a lot of that happened when I was a freshman legislator, and so here's this longtime lobbyist who walks into my office as a know-nothing freshman and says, "Hey, I got a perfect bill for you." Well, it was concerning a topic I knew absolutely nothing about, and I said, "Well, how's this the perfect bill for me?" And he more or less said, "Well, because I'm going to help you get it passed, and then you'll be able to get a bill passed your first term." Yeah. And I said, "So if this is such a great bill, why are you bringing it to a know-nothing freshman, right? Why didn't you take this to a senior or a junior, right? Or somebody in leadership, right? If it's the perfect bill." And so whenever I started talking logic with him about how I probably wasn't the perfect person for the bill, well, then he decided he'd move on down the hallway because he knew out of 163 of us, he could find somebody who would do that for him.
Yeah. I used to have this cartoon on the wall of my office where a guy's talking to his school-age daughter and says, "Who does a congressman work for?" And she says, "The people." And he says, "Well, let me rephrase the question. Let's assume you're auditioning for a job that pays $174 a year, $174,000 a year for 2 years, but it costs $30 million to get that job. Now, who does the congressman work for?" And she says, "The highest bidder," right? And political, in national offices now, the cost of getting elected is so huge that without the backing of the PACs and the lobbyists, you can't do it. I mean, Glenn Youngkin's grassroots campaign to become governor of Virginia cost $125 million.
So you take, let's just talk about, just as way of example. Now, the only reason I use it as an example is because my Senate district doesn't have TV and doesn't have radio, so you don't need a lot of money to run in this seat. But by the time we're all in, all the candidates, we're going to be, pushing probably right around $800,000 going to be spent in this race, and potentially even more than that as the race tightens up. But the truth is that it should never be the case. It should not. Like you just pointed out, the job pays $33,500 a year, right? Yeah. There's no logical reason for that. It's, if, and I'm a fan of people supporting good government. Absolutely. If it was the people doing the supporting, and, unfortunately what we have is a situation where people will complain about their elected officials constantly, but they will not do one thing to help the guy they wanted get elected. Yeah. And, whether it's a campaign contribution or a, helping them, put up signs or door knock or all of those things that are required. And so, if you are not going to take charge, someone else will, because we're talking about a lot of money available out there that use your tax dollars that's being pushed through. And trust me, I know, I'm being on budget committee for 8 years. There's a whole lot of special interests that have a special interest in your tax dollars.
Well, and then we bring the topic back around to the data centers. I mean, the amount of money is so huge that you take somebody who is going to be offered a huge sum of money. I mean, we're talking, OpenAI is spending $25 billion for a data center in Patagonia, right? 25 billion. I don't know what the gross national product of Patagonia is, but I guarantee you $25 billion is a big chunk of it. I mean, to toss at a country like Patagonia, who's going to turn that down? And yet, and I'll go back, I probably said this last week on the show, but I mean, a year ago, March 30th of 2025, Elon Musk and 1,800 other scientists and developers signed a letter calling for a pause in AI because, as they said at the time, that we're going to create something more numerous than we are, bigger than we are, smarter than we are, which will obsolete us. And Elon Musk said that AI will cause the obliteration of the human race. Well, Elon was questioned about that now a month ago, and he's revised his estimate. He now believes there's only a 20% chance that AI will lead to the extinction of the human race. Well, put a 5-shot pistol to your head, put one bullet in it, right? And see how many people are going to voluntarily pull that trigger. But we're all doing it right now. And everybody from the president on down to L.B. Eckelkamp in Franklin County are promoting data centers without ever explaining why or how it's going to benefit us. It's going to create universal surveillance, universal control, universal slavery. And, our tech executives have been pushing the STEM agenda, science, technology, engineering, and math to all the kids in college.
Right.
All those jobs are going to be gone. Even the people promoting AI are promising us that 50% of all the white-collar jobs in the country will be eliminated within 2 to 3 years. How come there's not revolution? How come there's not people in the streets saying, how are we going to live? How are we going to pay our mortgages? Where's that tax base going to come from?
Well, because they promote the utopia aspect of it. This is going to be AI will create a world where no one will have to work and everything will be provided for you because the AI and the robots can do all that for you. Well, once again, the whatever you said earlier. Anthropic. I'm sorry. The study. The logical conclusion of that is sooner or later the machine figures out it doesn't need you anymore, and then you become just like a virus or a bacteria that that we fought against, to try to get rid of those things that affect our health. But the machine will figure out a way to get rid of the thing affecting its health.
Yeah, I call it bugs in the garden, right? That the AI will allow us to exist as long as you don't chew up too many of the tomatoes.
Well, until it no longer needs us to even create anything that it needs, right?
Yeah.
And so it is the nightmare scenario that the Terminator movies were based on. But I talked about this earlier that when we watched that movie back in the 80s, we were thinking, well, that's 100 years into the future, and but I don't even think Moore's law existed at that point, but. I don't remember exactly how it goes, but Moore's law says every 2 years, the space that the same amount of memory occupies divides by half. And I think that is actually accelerated beyond that. So now it's the square of that velocity because these data centers, truthfully, we've always had data centers. Let's face it. I mean, credit card processing has been done in data centers for years now. And we didn't call them data centers. We called them credit card processing centers. And truthfully, most data centers, that's exactly what they're doing. They're processing your order from Amazon, or they're processing your credit card transaction, but they're also storing that data that you just talked about. They're storing all of that data from Meta because that's how Zuckerberg makes his money. He sells that information to companies who target you specifically. They will write a commercial. AI will write a commercial specifically designed for you.
Yeah, I challenge people when I give speeches. I always say this: turn your phone off, put it on the table next to you, then talk to your spouse about something you really want to buy. Turn your phone back on, and guess what's going to pop up as the first thing?
Well, so I told some folks the other night at one of these things, it's like, well, you hate data centers, right? Well, then I know an easy way to get rid of them tomorrow. And then, oh, yeah, well, that's what we want to do. Well, get rid of your iPhone and get rid of your credit cards. And data centers disappear. I mean, there's no need for them. Now, keep in mind, they're still going to have the data they already collected on you because you gave that to them voluntarily. You told them your favorite movie, your favorite book, your kids' birthdays, your wife's birthday. You told Facebook everything it needs to market you directly, to crack all of your passwords. You gave it voluntarily. When you scroll down there to the bottom, and you'll appreciate this as an attorney, never reading any one of those 68 pages of end user agreement, and you just check the box, I accept. Well, what you agreed to there was for them to have access to everything in your phone and to use it for whatever purpose they wanted.
Yeah. Well, it's a frightening world out there, and you know, I don't know quite what we're going to do about it. I reminisce sometimes about the old days, but I was having lunch with one of our United States congressmen the other day, and I was talking about this. And they all have these same talking points that have been given to them by the billionaires. And that is, you know, when tractors were invented, you know, everybody was worried that it'd put farmers out of business because you'd have less need for manual labor. And by the way, when horse-pulled plows went away, you know, everybody was afraid of, you know, this machinery taking the place of their horses. Well, yeah, machinery did take the place of the horses. I don't want to be the horse, right? But the tractor never had a mind, and the tractor didn't turn itself on. And the tractor didn't try to run over you if it didn't like what you're doing. But these tractors will turn themselves. As of 2027, every car made in the United States by law now is required to have a chip in it, which will monitor your behavior. And your car will determine if you're sober enough or conscious enough or aware enough to drive. And it will turn itself off if your car, determines that it doesn't think you're safe enough to drive. That's already law in this country.
Did you see that story on Fox News where they were over there covering the meeting between China and the United States? Trump went over, and so their van, you know, that carries all their camera equipment and the people around, you know, they came from the hotel and they pulled into this no parking spot for 2 minutes and just to unload some stuff and then go on. And they said within just a few minutes they had a ticket on their phone.
Yeah.
Parking ticket on their phone. Well, there was not a human being that was watching that. That was AI discovering the violation. And so that is the future that you're looking at, all under the guise of safety, right?
Well,
so
and,
what
and more than that, we now have AI directed munitions.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Franklin said, he said, he who would sacrifice essential liberty for a small bit of security deserves neither.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and Thomas Jefferson said, I'd rather live in dangerous freedom than safety of slavery, or words to that effect.
Yeah. A government that can give you, Adams was a government that can give you everything you want, can take everything you have.
Now, Mark, I had a quick question for you because I get notifications from the Post-Dispatch, and your name has come up twice recently. First one was on the data centers where you were speaking out against it. And of course, we know the Post-Dispatch, unfortunately. I think at one time they were maybe a reliable source. Now it seems like they're just part of a local mainstream media in St. Louis. Your opinion on that, but your name came up with the data centers, but also I saw your name the other day and it brought up how you've been defending a lot of the January 6th, defendants, and it brought up the weaponization fund and how suddenly now that's created a surge in these cases. Can you give us some what's validity here? Like what's true, what's not? Is there anything going on with this? Because I think there's a lot of misinformation obviously going on about this.
Well, and I've been working since, January 20th of 2025, trying to get some compensation for the J6 political prisoners. And we had suggested back probably in March of 2025, a similar program where the Justice Department would set aside a fund which would be specific to the J6ers in our format, with a large number of mediators that could then adjudicate claims and draw the funds out of the judgment fund, which is essentially a bottomless pit of money that the DOJ uses to settle claims against the United States government. I had done it for over a year and 4 months, and I'd made absolutely no headway. And, I thought it was pretty close to being a dead deal, other than filing the lawsuits and which are rife with all kinds of issues. And then all of a sudden, the government discloses this anti-weaponization fund of $1,776,000,000, which is open not just to the J6ers, but anybody who felt they were victims of lawfare, including like BLM and Hunter Biden and, all of Mike Lindell's employees and everybody that got fired from the military for not taking the jab, fill in the blank, hundreds of thousands of people, which you divide into that 1.7 billion and it becomes a meaningless number. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, it did cause a great deal of enthusiasm amongst the people that I represented. But now, it has gone away. Todd Blanche testified this week that they've abandoned it and they're never going to reactivate it. There's some Republicans in the House and Senate now fighting for it. But I think that's dead in the water. And that's what I've been telling my clients.
There's so many examples of why something like that would be necessary. And I remember some stories I'd heard probably within the last 4 or 5 years concerning the waters of the U.S. determination. You'll remember that it was Judge Alito, I believe it was, who wrote the majority opinion on that, when it said that basically that that in order for it to be waters of the U.S., then the stream that falls under the regulation has to have a water surface at least most of the time, right? and then Kennedy wrote a concurrent opinion that said something to the effect of as long as there's a nexus between them. Well, what the heck does nexus mean, right? Well, essentially, he had voted with the majority, but he wrote his own opinion. Mm-hmm. So you know which one the Corps of Engineers used, right? Oh, yeah. They used the decision the opinion written by Kennedy, and so they went back at those people who had theoretically had disturbed the snail darter or whatever, right? And they said, okay, well, here you can't develop this land. And they said, now wait a minute, the Supreme Court just said it has to have a water surface. Well, no. It just has to have a nexus. And they said, well, that's not what the majority opinion said. And they said, okay, well, go ahead and sue us. Yeah. Because the Corps of Engineers has an unlimited number of attorneys and with an unlimited amount of money to be able to go to court against you. And they know it took millions of dollars to get that thing to the Supreme Court anyway. You ain't doing it again, right? And so that's where I think that Chevron deference made a huge difference on that one particular one, because now, as you well know, now that shoves that onerous back on the government to prove that for the burden of proof. Yeah, yeah. And so in some of the stuff that you're talking about there, we absolutely have the problem of yes, you can push back against it. And you can be 100% correct, and still nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, I turned on the faucet in the back of my office building here this morning to run some water in for my birds so they can take a bath back there. Right. Well, that water, when it gets too full, runs down the drain. So under that Supreme Court decision, it's a navigable waterway. Right.
Yeah.
The feds can regulate my bird bath.
I remember a decision that I'd read that came from the late 1880s, and it was dealing with the subject of navigability, and it's hilarious because of the judge, who obviously had a lot of common sense. And he said, okay, on the subject of navigability, true that it is that the riverways have been used for highways for many generations in this country, even before it was the United States of America. And so there's an established prescriptive right, for folks to use those waterways. But he says, but that doesn't necessarily mean that any ditch that can float a scow during a freshet, it would be subject to that easement. It was just the use of language that I found humorous. And I actually think he meant for it to be humorous, right? Float a scow during a freshet, right? So you get a little toad strangler and you can float a canoe on it. Doesn't mean that the public has a right to walk up that creek, right?
Yeah. So. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it's I've been talking about this for a very long time, about the risk of AI. Yeah. And I've been harking back to the Butlerian jihad for since the first concept of AI was developed, essentially decades ago now, and as it's been creeping more and more into our lifestyle. But in the concept of AI creating utopia, what is a more unhappy and less productive group of human beings than those that are already living on the public dole, right?
Right.
People that don't have purpose in life, that don't have jobs, that don't have a need to go out and provide for their families. Are these happy people? Are these productive people? Are these the kind of people that we want to have as a future of human beings? This is a hell on earth until we get exterminated. From my
but AI has no incentive to create a utopia for us. That would be like us creating a utopia for bacterium.
Yeah,
right. There's no incentive for it to do it. It literally does not need us at some point. And so the danger is that the nightmare scenario of Skynet. Well, I don't know how far away we are, but we're a lot closer to that than we were before, and without a doubt. And the machine doesn't. When the machine does not need us, it doesn't need agriculture anymore. It may need mining, but it certainly doesn't need agriculture.
Yeah.
And in fact, it doesn't even need oxygen to survive. So it really doesn't even need plants.
Yeah.
And so there's some minerals out there, but it will eventually get to the point where it's going to recycle anyway. So to create the new version of itself, it will recycle its own in order to do that. And that will continue on until the planet is consumed by the sun. And so, yes, I do see aspects of the mark of the beast inside of this stuff, because right now, my phone always wants me to use my iris to open it up. Right. It wants me to use my fingerprint to open it up. So of course it records all of that data and stores it and all that kind of stuff. And I get this vision where it's in Revelation, it talks about, the mark will be carried in their right hand or on their forehead. And, so it's like, oof, it's scarily close to that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe that's what it is, right?
And all these things are self-fulfilling prophecies, right? If you read Revelations and you think that this is the way to go, then once again, this is the way it happens. And the thing that shocks me every day when I wake up is how the American people have been cowed and pacified. I mean, when I was running for Senate, I would say this every day. In some point in my life, I figured that FEMA would create a faux emergency and declare a state of emergency and lock us all down, put us under house arrest, and not let us go to church and not let us go to school and not let us go see our own parents dying in the hospital and all those sorts of things. But I figured they'd have to put a gun to our head to make us comply.
Yeah, right.
Then COVID happened.
Right.
Everybody just did it. Everybody just, even if it cost you your life savings, even if it cost you your business, even if you couldn't watch your own child get born if you were a man, even the sheep in Australia and New Zealand took to the streets. Not a single person in the United States of America. And one of the most frightening things that happened this week, Donald Trump signed an executive order to allow the government to seize the bank accounts and the assets of anybody they don't like, in effect. Anybody that they think is a terrorist organization or a drug trafficking organization. This is no different than what Trudeau did in Canada during the trucker revolt, right? Mm-hmm. He froze their bank accounts. He went in there, even as far as going into their houses and killing their pets, right? But I mean, as retribution for being against the establishment. That executive order took place this week. I didn't hear a whimper about it in the national press or on, state media called Fox or any of these other things.
Because they're in on the joke. Right.
Yeah.
They all benefit from that in some degree or another. I'm going to have to go read that executive order so I know what you're talking about there for sure. But people say if you prior to COVID, if you told someone that this is what's going to happen, right? The government's going to tell you can't go to church. You know what? Almost every person would say, well, I can't do that because of the First Amendment, right? Yeah. So how quick we let them have our rights with no good reason to do it, right? Simply because we were getting our information only from them, or in a lot of this Facebook is just propaganda generated by those who would want to do us harm, and so a lot of the stuff we're seeing today is related to all of that. I read one story and tried to find some more information on it, but it's pretty scant about a lot of the stuff that you're seeing is more about China wanting to be able to control the AI that's out there. because as we said in an earlier segment, he who creates, who gets out there with this advanced general intelligence, the basically the smart AI, he becomes emperor of the world.
Yeah.
And because the real currency today is information.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of these folks like Sam Altman believe that they will upload their consciousness into the web and they will become immortal godlike people or entities. And they actually believe that. That's what they're working for. And they want to rule the world. I mean, and I'll go more broad, and I'll piss off everybody in the world probably saying this, but our current government is led by a bunch of really bizarre, weird people. That we're supposed to be this nation of, a Christian nation of God-fearing people, traditional American values, government by the people, for the people, and of the people. We've got Peter Thiel, who gave us J.D. Vance, who, with his husband, have now moved to Buenos Aires. We've got Scott Bessent as Secretary of the Treasury, with his husband, who used to run George Soros's European operation. And this is a guy that's going to save us from globalism. We've got Rick Grinnell, openly gay guy, who is now his official title is Special Presidential Envoy for Special Missions. What the hell does that mean? We've got all these weird, twisted people that are in high levels of authority in our country. And, are any of these people actually representing people like Don Mayhew and Mark McCloskey and, Mr. Maxwell there? I mean, these people don't reflect our values. They don't reflect the American traditional values that we all thought we were electing Donald Trump to reinvigorate in this country. I'm going to go out and I'm supposed to address the Montana Republican Party a week from today. And when I was out at the RNC's winter meeting in Santa Barbara this spring, I asked this question of Scott Jennings, who was one of the speakers at the end of his presentation. I said, the people that voted for me when I ran for Senate, and the people that voted for Donald Trump, the people that may never have voted before but voted for Donald Trump, the people in camo and a big pickup truck and a gimme cap and tactical glasses, they all feel like they've been abandoned by the party. They feel like what they elected Trump to do has just been ignored, and Trump has now totally joined the Epstein class and doing everything except representing the American people. How do we draw those people back in? And that's one of the things I'm supposed to be addressing with the Montana Party a week from today. I don't know the answer to that, because every day it seems more and more like the billionaire class, the Epstein class, and they basically have, I hate to say it, but a lot of very bizarre and weird people are running America, and it has nothing to do with the average American or those things that we thought we elected Trump to do. It's a fascinating world.
So the one thing on that, Mark, is who allowed that to happen? So I'll give you a really quick example here. We passed marijuana here in Missouri, and basically 22% of the electorate, hung that millstone around our neck. If you look at the numbers on it, Kansas City, St. Louis, Greene County, and Boone County all voted 70% voter turnout. But you take my home county and Pulaski County, I mean, we had 38% voter turnout in that exact same election. In fact, there's a stripe of counties right up the middle of the state that are, good, solid, hardcore red, good Christian Republican territory that all voted less than 40%. And those 8 counties, had they only voted what they do in a presidential race of right around 54% on average, that would have been enough votes to prevent marijuana from passing. So I'm not sure that it's Kansas City and St. Louis that's doing it to us. If we're not going to show up to vote, then these things are going to keep happening to us. And I will tell you this, nearly all political advertising has nothing to do with convincing you to vote for me. It's convincing you that you don't stand a chance. Your guy doesn't stand a chance. Yeah. And so why bother going to vote? And so there was a lot of that factor that goes into that. And so once you train that into people that my vote doesn't matter, well, then guess what? They're not going to show up to vote. Yeah. But in Kansas City and St. Louis, we can give them enough cigarettes where we can get them to vote. Or if they don't want to go to the trouble, we'll just vote for them. Yeah. Right? So So I think that the local cemetery there, that though I may have convinced about half of them to quit voting Democrat and start voting Republican again.
Mark, we got to get going here for a commercial break, but let everybody know where they can reach out to you and also hire you if they're in need.
That's McCloskeylaw.com, McCloskeylaw.com. My phone number is 314-721-4000, and I always give out my cell. It's 314-580-3185. And I'll leave you with one more thing. In Christian County, Missouri, there is a transgender man who has filed to run for a committee woman's part. And oddly enough, unlike 13 other states, Missouri doesn't have any statute, and Don, maybe you can work on this, that describes a woman as a person born a woman by anatomy and genes, regardless of what they may call themselves now.
Well, I think we did that.
Well, there's one under the transgender law.
Yeah.
It says a female sex is defined as X, but the statute that creates committee men and women uses the word woman, and there's no statute that I could find that equates woman and female as only genetic.
Yeah, leave it up to some lawyer to parse the words, right?
Well, the lawyer for the trans guy will parse that word, I guarantee you.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Appreciate it, buddy.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys. Take care.
That is Mark McCloskey. We're going to go and take our next commercial break and be back right after this.
With warmer temperatures right around the corner and allergies ramping up, now's the time to get those AC units serviced. At Hartley's, we pride ourselves in offering outstanding service with fast response times. With proper maintenance, you can make those hot days be a lot cooler and remove those pesky allergens that always seem to find their way into your home. Call us today so you can be living a much cooler and healthier life. Hartley's, community born, community raised, community serving.
Call Hartley's Climate Control today at 573-368-3163.
Never be too coy to tell your friends and family about koi sushi and hibachi. Celebrate the best Chinese-Japanese restaurant in the Midwest. Call 573-426-5551 to make a reservation or order takeout. Locally owned, 1808 North Bishop, Rolla, Missouri.
We can sum up McDonald's new crispy chicken sandwich in one word. Crispy. But also juicy and tender. Okay, it's crispy, juicy, tender. All one word? But then, also pickle. Oh, and potato bun, which is two words. Okay, we can't sum up our new crispy chicken sandwich in one word, so you'll just have to try it to understand it. Order ahead on the McDonald's app at participating McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Merrill's Quarry and Asphalt, 40 years serving cities, counties, and everyday businesses with driveways for people who live and work in our little piece of heaven right smack dab in the middle of America. Call 573-578-9101 for your free estimate of rocking, rolling, paving, driveways, sealing, and striping too. That's 573-578-9101 for your free estimate.
Your home is your castle, you don't need unwanted hassle. Don't let those creatures move in to stay. Let us protect your investments, that's what we're all about. Plank Termite and Pest Control will save the day.
Plank is locally owned and family operated right here in Rolla, a Google preferred business. Our customer service and your satisfaction is our number one goal. So call Plank today at 368-3333.
Plank Termite and Pest Control will save the day.
Busy schedule? Let your locally owned Price Chopper help you save time with online shopping. It's easy. Sign up to tcmarkets.com or download our mobile app in the App Store or Google Play. Create an account and browse through the categories and choose the items you need. When you place your order, your personal shopper will get all of the items you've selected, taking the same care you would and following your notes. We offer free curbside pickup, so you don't even have to get out of your car. Start your online order today and no online shopping fee for a limited time. Go to tcmarkets.com or download our mobile app to get started. Price Chopper. Fresher savings every day. Insurance going up like crazy? Daniel and Henry Insurance is one of the largest private insurance companies in the world. Richard Boyette, 314-444-5011. He's my guy at Daniel and Henry for 10 years. Business or personal, call Richard at 314-444-5011. He's the best.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Bob Willis, an author and writer, and I write nature books. I live here in a ranch on the Ozarks and have published many books over 2 decades of writing. The Trout Adventure series of books was about traveling the world with a camera and a fly rod. The Last Buffalo in Kansas is a true story about one family's journey through 100 years of American history. A couple of years ago, I decided to write a children's nature series of books. 2 of those books have been published. The Adventures of Dog is a story about a puppy that grows up on a ranch in the Ozarks and has fabulous adventures. The Adventures of the Cats R Us Gang is about a group of cats that band together to protect the ranch from a dastardly group of raccoons. Wonderful stories for children, wholesome, about nature and the Ozarks. They're available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and in Walmart even. They're available locally at Reader's Depot. Hey, take a look at them. Thanks a lot.
Maybe it's for a kitchen you've always wanted. Maybe it's just to have a little extra room. Whatever the reason you're considering a new home loan, it's good to know that Town & Country Bank will guide you in the right direction. Our experienced local lenders are here to help you with a new home construction, remodeling projects, and fixed and adjustable rate home loans. You can even start the process online by clicking Online Mortgage Center at tcbanks.com. Smart, friendly solutions. Town & Country Bank. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Hey, we're back. And so appreciate everybody coming on the show this morning. And I'm going to welcome to the studio my good friend, Bill Hardwick. How you doing, Bill?
Hey, good morning, Don. How are you doing?
Oh, no, I don't know. I woke up old, bald, and fat for the 2nd day in a row. Other than that, I guess I'm okay.
I think you're doing pretty good.
Well, thank you very much. So what's been going on today?
Oh, me, I'm campaigning.
No, you don't say.
I know, right? I think I should at least put a good effort at it.
Yeah. You know? So how's that dog catcher race going?
Well, a lot of people say I couldn't get elected dog catcher, and some days I believe them.
Well, it depends on which particular Facebook page you're on at the time. So
yeah, Facebook seems like it's the worst.
Apparently, somebody told me this. I didn't read it on the internet, so I'm just going to have to take their word for it. But apparently, the local opposing party claims that I called people stupid because they voted for the marijuana law, and so they went on to describe what I actually said, and I said, yeah, that's pretty accurate. That's pretty much exactly what I said. I didn't use the word stupid anywhere, but I did say that folks needed to be educated on these initiative petitions that they vote for, because apparently their contention is that people read all 43 pages of the marijuana amendment. And, I did a very scientific study. I asked everyone who claimed they voted for it and everyone who claimed they voted against it. I asked them if they read the 43 pages, and to a person, not one person said that they even knew there was 43 pages to it, right?
The presentation of the ballot's misleading in itself.
Yeah.
We talked about that, just saying that the person who has the IP should have the entire IP printed, and they just pay for it. That was no cost to the state.
Yeah.
And that way, if it's a really long one, people just vote no. And I don't think that's a half bad idea, because I'm not sure we need 40 pages in the Constitution.
No, I was a big fan of that. I mean, that exact thing. And I can't remember who it was. I actually think it was if memory serves me correctly, it was Dan Stacy. He and I were talking about that one day, and I don't know who said it first, but it was like, if you're going to do this, if you want this amendment passed, then you should have copies available to everyone who's going to vote on it.
Right.
And those should be available at the very least at the polling place. And then you get handed that thing when you walk in there, and just like you said, it's like, hey, I ain't reading this 43 pages of stuff. I'm just going to vote against it.
And so we should favor, shorter amendments to the Constitution that are digestible and understandable, and people can read them. Yeah.
Well, that to have truly constitutional effect, right? If we found something, this is a poor example, but the only one that comes to mind, if we found a defect in the freedom of speech, right, the First Amendment, right, that has a wide-reaching effect. And, perhaps the Supreme Court comes down with a decision that recognizes that we need to make this change. Okay, well, I think that's what Amendment 5 is really all about, is exactly that situation where, in order for us to change the Constitution, it has to have broad appeal, right? Right. And not meaning that there aren't other things that need to be done, but at the very least, if we're going to go to the trouble of tearing a page out or adding a page, then that should be something that has a compelling interest throughout the state, right?
The Constitution should be it should be structural and rights, the structure of the government and the rights of the people. Mm-hmm. Sports betting should not be in the Missouri Constitution. Abortion should not be in the Missouri Constitution.
Bingo should not be in the Constitution.
Bingo should not be in the Missouri Constitution. Marijuana should not be in the Missouri Constitution. Yeah. Those are things for the legislature to make laws about and then have regulatory structure around. Mm-hmm. But the Constitution itself should not go into the detail of when you could pull over and search a car for marijuana.
Right.
The Constitution should set up the branches of government, should set up the powers that are divided to each branch. And then and our Constitution has a really good description of the rights of the people. Mm-hmm. They're just not followed because these other parts added to the Constitution consume it in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But I think, if I could go in and take sports betting out and marijuana out and abortion out and bingo out and all the other things that people have, paid and moneyed interest have put in the Constitution, I would.
Well, and so, you brought up an extremely good point there. Is once it goes into the Constitution, it's very difficult to get something changed. Yeah. I don't think there's anyone out there, even proponents of that, most of the proponents of that amendment, at least of their understanding of it, would be against a breathalyzer test being available for marijuana. However, the way that the amendment was written, in the legislature cannot pass a law related to having a breathalyzer like we have for alcohol, right?
Right.
Because it requires a change in the Constitution for us to be able to even institute a breathalyzer test for marijuana. And which is problematic, obviously, for law enforcement, but also has the people have a compelling interest in that, right? If you look at Colorado, they're right at legalization. There was a 300% increase in driving under the influence right at legalization. Well, they didn't differentiate between alcohol and marijuana in that particular case, but whenever prior to that, Colorado was on the same downward trajectory as all the other states around them, including Missouri, for alcohol-related fatalities on their highways. So the only thing that changed was in Colorado with the legalization. And a lot of that had to do with how law enforcement became hamstrung by the law that was written to allow for the legalization of marijuana.
No, that's a good example why something like that doesn't belong in the Constitution. And you could be for or against medical marijuana. You could substantively be for or against any of these issues. Right. My point is they do not belong in the Constitution. And that's part of what the point that you made is because the people of the state may change their mind from time to time what they want the laws to be.
Yeah.
And every 2 years they have a mechanism to send different reps that are consistent with what they want, and every 4 years, different senators, and we have this turnover, this revolution, political revolution. So if you send those people up there to change the laws, but they can't because all the laws, all the rules are written in the Constitution, then that makes the people irrelevant in a lot of ways. It makes the legislature irrelevant. It makes the government irrelevant.
But more importantly, it makes the only people who are in control the special interest.
Correct.
Because they're the ones who can afford to put that kind of stuff on the ballot.
That's right. With so much money, you could put whatever you want in the Constitution. You could word it whatever. You could have an ad campaign, and that's a problem too. But so, and the pushback against that is your rep should matter. It should matter the representative you send up there. If somebody campaigns for state rep and they say, "I'm going to change things. I'm going to fight for this. I hear the issue that's in my community. I'm going to go up there and work on it." And they show up and they can't because the Constitution's so vast that it's already preempted the field for legislation. And the special interests are completely in charge, and power is concentrated in the hands of a few people. That representative is completely irrelevant. That representative has to beg and plead and fight and scrap and be very strategic about if they could even speak on a bill. That means that the people that representative represents are not being represented.
Exactly. Well, there's some people being represented, but it ain't nobody from your district.
Right.
And so I thought about, put a lot of thought into that over the years, obviously, in my 8th year up there in the House and tried to figure out, well, was this by design or was it an accident? Did it happen organically? Well, it did. And a lot of it was our own doing. And I know this is not popular, but the reality is that we tried to solve a structural problem in our government with term limits. It seemed like the thing to do, and I'm not saying that because I'm at the end of my term and that I want to somehow extend it. The reality is that then the power shift went toward the lobbyists and the bureaucrats, and you are very familiar with this also, and so not by some grand design, because I do think that a lot of the lobbyists, they're up there to do a job, and I've told many of them, as you probably have, that, okay, well, I can't do your thing, right? And, if they want an explanation, I give them one. But the reality is most of those recognize that, they want to try to convince you. But I said, I understand you're trying to do your job and I'm doing mine.
Yeah.
I'm not working for you. I'm working for the people. If your thing helps my people, then I'm okay with it. If it doesn't, then I'm not. Right. It's that simple. But you and I both know legislators who don't have a lot of experience in government who unfortunately react as their mind is made up by the last person that they talk to.
Sure.
And so you find out really quick. I mean, I've been school board member and a county official, that's not the way to react to a situation. I mean, it's not that person doesn't have some need or compelling interest for a change in something, but it's not something we should knee jerk on every time somebody has a comment or a statement or a complaint. And so kind of what we've been talking about, Bill, is data centers and how they relate to things. And part of the issue here is Facebook, right? Or any one of the other social medias that, quite honestly, they don't exist without data centers. And so how that figures into the equation. So now folks, I mean, necessarily so, I won't, I won't even say a nice comment about our lamestream networks out there, but I think even they are reacting to the way society has been now built around social media and other places where people are getting all of their information from unverified sources and quite honestly, some pretty crazy stuff.
Well, there's an irony in we're able to spread the word about the problem of data centers and the problem of, and you mentioned the other day, artificial general intelligence, which is, which is which is on the list of things that we're going to have to combat in the next couple of decades,
Absolutely.
like a true existential threat. So the irony of that, we're spreading the word using the social media. That social media, the servers are held by data centers. But I also think the point is worth making. And this is a very valid point that I share, and a lot of people critical of data centers share, is that so data centers exist now, and that's the matrix for all of the information on social media, on your phone, everything like that. The capacity that is required for all these new data centers being built is orders of magnitude greater than the existing server capacity. That's a contradiction with what you think about with something like with Moore's Law, where that the computing power doubles every 18 months.
Years,
Yeah, roughly every 2 years.
Yep.
I mean, that's a good point too. The model changes. But let's say, I think Moore said 18 months. The capacity doubles, but the geographic space is not increased in requirement.
Yep. Reduces by half.
The transistor continues to slow. So if Moore's Law holds true, and we still are having this physical capacity to build these data centers, then it logically follows, we can deduce that the amount of data that's going to be housed is significantly greater on human beings than is presently housed.
Yep.
And the amount of computing power that artificial intelligence will need, and their electricity requirements, their coolant requirements, and just the capacity requirement, right, to think. The humans, I still think we don't know what the human brain is, and we've always struggled. We don't exactly know what consciousness is, but I've read some recent articles that say the human brain's akin to a quantum computer. And what a quantum computer does is the computing power is so much greater because instead of information theory where I have a 1 and a 0, a quantum computer can contemplate the possibility of the 1 and the 0 simultaneously. And then it can commingle the existence of, its entanglement is the word, that the advent of a 0 will entangle to the next future activity. So all these things happen simultaneously. Well, so the human brain can do that, right? We have this consciousness that all these things are happening contradictorily in the human brain. But so I think that's the point a lot of making about data centers is you already have everything on my phone. Through the flock cameras, you already have everywhere I've been the last year, which is creepy in itself. By the way, it's a huge problem. You already have all my goofy Facebook posts and all my memes and reels I sent and all that stuff. You already have all that. Now you want, to the 10th power more information about me, about my life, and the ability to analyze it. Like you were talking about the Bible. That's a fascinating point. And I've been citing that a lot because nobody's going to go read. I'm going to go still read the Bible. You're going to go read the Bible. JP's going to read the Bible. But as generations trickle in, they won't open the Bible. They'll ask AI what the Bible says. They won't read Tale of Two Cities. They won't read Tom Sawyer. They'll ask AI, what's the point of what Mark Twain said? So people will quit thinking for themselves and they'll quit seeking truth for themselves. And as a result, there'll be and I'm sorry, I'm going a little riff there.
But the truth becomes what the machine wants the truth to be, right?
So that's why now I can get conspiratorial. I was going to talk about spontaneous order in the legislature and all that stuff because you made my mind think about that. But now I'll get what Bill's personal feeling is. And you could clip this moment in the New York Times and I could lose the Senate race or whatever, but I'll give you I think it's worth.
Well, nobody around here reads the New York Times, Bill. There's certainly nobody that's voting.
You can put it in the next hit piece in whatever newspaper. But the problem is the problem of truth, and that the authority will be who controls the artificial intelligence systems.
Right.
And this massive amount of data and this control on knowledge will be used to control it's something that President Xi and it could have only dreamed of. It's that dictators in the history of the world can only have dreamed of having this ability,
right?
Because it'll be used to control the minds of the people entirely.
So,
and we have to. We're the leaders of the state. We have to figure out a way to fight that.
And so, and which in itself becomes problematic. When you mentioned quantum computing, so whenever you're dealing with that quantum level, we're actually talking about the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
What that is that's the fuzzy stuff in between the 1 and the 0, right? And so in quantum computing, it doesn't even depend on that, right? But anytime we try to figure out where the 1 is, it affects it to the point where it becomes a 0.
Yeah.
And then whenever we look away, it goes back to being a 1.
Schrodinger's cat, right?
Yeah, Schrodinger's cat. Absolutely. And
we do have Jeff Myers on with us too.
Oh, all right. It's about time. Jeff, we were getting into quantum computing there, and so you came in at the right time, buddy.
Let's pick it up because I do think this is good for someday philosophy. This is apocalyptic. This is also reality, and I think it's a good discussion. But now it's having a nexus with our politics, our farmland, our energy problems, stuff like that. So it's good discussion.
So let's introduce Jeff here so he can jump in on this conversation. So we've got State Representative Jeff Myers from, what's your district number, 56? Oh, wait a minute.
Jeff, you have yourself muted.
Yeah, turn your mute off there. Yeah.
Well, I was trying to get all my stuff together, technology, and I sometimes don't get it going.
As much as I would... as much as I love your impression of a certain legislator, I did mute you on purpose. So
I can understand why you would. I mean, there's always that chance that might come out. We'll see as this goes on. We'll see how this interview goes. So I represent the Fighting 42nd, which is Warren County and part of Montgomery.
Yeah. And so Jeff's claim to fame is that he actually has one of these hyperscale data centers that's being built in his district. And so as a good legislator, as Jeff is, Jeff has done his homework and is very and obviously, since it's being built in his district, he by necessity had to learn a lot about it. And so that's why he was invited on the show to help us sort the wheat from the chaff. And so, if you don't mind, Jeff, kind of give us a brief kind of summary of what you've got going on up there in your district.
So my district's a little bit unique in the fact of we have an economic development council here that really worked hard to bring in projects. Most of our workforce leaves and goes east. So they tried to look at bringing in industry to our area to prevent that, to keep those jobs at home. So high paying jobs that paid more than what we pay currently. That led to a $900 million investment into a meat processing plant that's state of the art. We manufacture shingles for Certainty, not very far from my house. And so those are all good paying jobs. But one of the projects that was on the horizon was a data center. And this was about 3 years ago as I talked to our director of that. And so that caused me to start looking into what they were, and, the pros and the cons. And so doing part of that, and also sitting on utilities at the same time with being aware that some of these things were coming down the pike, really got me interested in energy policy, and also the protections to make sure that we don't impact our ratepayers by having to pay for all the infrastructure for these large multinational corporations coming in. So a data center it could be as simple as racks that store your data. Like right now, I'm sitting, I don't know, probably about 200 miles from you, but this is all going through the cloud. Everything that's on your cell phone goes to the cloud. Well, the cloud is a building.
Bitcoin, there's a lot of folks out there that are big fans of Bitcoin, but Bitcoin doesn't exist without data centers. Is that correct?
And actually, it's funny you bring that up. There's a cryptocurrency mining operation here that sits right outside of a scrapyard, right off Interstate 70. People drive by it all the time. It's very small scale, but yeah, that's all it is. It's racks of servers that go through those algorithms looking for those coins. But it was something that obviously doing a deep dive into what were the pros, what were the cons. And this was before this explosion of information that's been put out lately. And that, I guess for me, is kind of a starting point on where I kind of formed my opinions. It was in the vacuum of this insane pushback that's going on. And when I say that, I'm not talking about the people that are doing it. I'm talking about just how much information is out there, how much is contrary to what I learned, going and digging deep into this stuff. And so, yeah, it's been kind of interesting to see.
Well, so you and I were at a sort of town hall meeting where we had discussed a lot of this stuff, and so some of the things that I said and then you had added into was, all the folks in the audience, pretty much except for one guy, all had a cell phone, right? And then just about all of them had a credit card or at least a debit card. And so the research I've done is that, currently, I mean, I'm not talking about in the future, but and as it has been now for several years, that the predominant amount of information that's exchanged is related to you buying something from Amazon and processing your credit card. All the stuff that you do on your phone, and you gave them the permission to store that data, right? They weren't doing it secretly. You checked the box, the end user agreement, you checked the box, I accept these conditions. And so a lot of folks objected to that part of it, as you'll recall, right? Well, I didn't know they were going to do this to me. And well, okay, that's true. I mean, they vote for things like the marijuana amendment, Medicaid expansion, and things like that without reading the fine print, right? We all know that we are cautioned against doing that kind of thing. But you then I think you had a great line, and I'll let you talk about it about, well, what if the data center came in and offered you this much money? Go ahead and expand on that for your property. What would you do then? But go ahead, because I loved your line on that.
Well, for me, for the most part, this is a property rights discussion. When we as a government start stepping in and say, you can build this here, or you can sell to this person, but not this person. It's a dilemma we run into when we talk about foreign actors coming in, China purchasing farmland. But if, who am I to tell that person, oh, you can sell to this person, you can sell to somebody from this country, but you can't sell to that country, even though the other person's going to pay a higher price.
Well, it kind of makes us sound like Europe, or
it really does. It really does.
China. So we just become what we hate, right?
Exactly. And so, it becomes a property rights issue. And literally, if we live in a free market society, and if somebody shows up and says, I'm going to pay, what's your price? And you name an astronomical price, and they're like, I'm going to put $5,000 more on top of that acre.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I'm going to take that deal. Right. My neighbors at that point, unless it's a public nuisance, they don't really factor into that. And it's been very interesting here. That piece of property that's getting a data center built on it in my district, it's been zoned industrial now for quite a while. There were several different companies that looked at it. One of them was a Cargill distribution point. So that's, tractor trailers coming in and out all times of the night, the beeping of the backing up and all of that. Another one was a lab that raised, that bred animals for research. And then the third was basically a recycling center, which for automobiles, which sounded pretty much like a junkyard to me. So then, you get this data center.
Oh, that was where catalytic converters were processed, stolen.
And now you have a company that comes in that's offering to build a data center there, and it was very interesting because we had a meeting. They have to run a power line 6 miles down from a 6,000 acre solar field that pretty much nobody cared about, that is pristine prairie farm ground. I mean, you put the tractor in gear, you don't turn around for a mile. Now it's just solar fields. Nobody cared about that.
Right.
But that's where the power distribution's coming down. It was 6 miles. They had to go through properties. And so they had all the affected property owners there, and man, they had the pitchforks out and the tar, and they were getting ready to crucify these people.
Right. Yeah.
And what they said was, we're going to pay for the right of way. We're not going to eminent domain it, and whatever you need for that price, we're negotiable. And that's exactly what they did. The people I haven't heard from are the people that signed a deal. The people that still complained a little bit were the ones that wanted the deal and didn't get cut into it.
So you brought up a very good point in all of that. Quite honestly, the only reason that people even knew about this was because of planning and zoning and that planning and zoning process, right? Well, I've asked folks who object to these things. It's like, okay, well, in order for you to be able to affect that, you need to make rules in planning and zoning. And so they're universally against planning and zoning, except for data centers, right? And so I said, well, you don't get that choice. It's planning and zoning for everybody. And so if you truly want statewide planning and zoning, it's pretty much the only way that you're going to be able to keep them. But wouldn't you agree that essentially Pandora's box has been opened, the toothpaste out of the tube, whatever analogy you want to use, is that now it's our duty, just like any new technology, now it's our duty as the government to put the controls on them. Like, right? We didn't have a speed limit when everybody drove horse and buggies, right? But when we got the car, we suddenly needed a law about the speed limit. And does everybody follow the speed limit? Well, no, but that's why we have law enforcement. And so all of those things, if we want an organized civil society, that's the process that we have to go through.
I totally agree with it, and again, it comes down to that individual property owner. And quite frankly, most people where I live around here, there's a little bit of envy. You know, it's like, hey, I don't have a big, large piece of property. I'm not going to get this windfall, but the one in the district right next to me, the $15 Google investment that's coming into our state, and most people don't understand that is. Yes, that is. There aren't any $15 million projects going in very, very few places in the state of Missouri, let alone 15 billion. But that was about 1,000 acres that the guy had a tree farm. He sold that. He went about 4 miles down the road, bought another piece of property, and he is starting his business up again. The difference is he has generational wealth in the bank. His children's children can go to school, not have to work, or they are set financially for the rest of their lives. And when you think about that, it's really easy if you're not that person confronted with that choice to say, you wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah.
Those numbers on a page, when you look at it, it's pretty substantial, and you have to think about what is the best for my future.
How many lottery winners gave the money back?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's that is an excellent point. We in living in free society, we do give up a certain number of protections, right? You can still get scammed.
Happens all the time.
Yeah, and but some of the controls that people have suggested, I ask them, well, do you want yourself to be subject to that? Well, of course they don't.
No.
And then the other ones was like, well, how long was that piece of property for sale? You always had the option of purchasing that piece of property. And of course, their comment and reply is that, well, I would never have that much money to be able to purchase that piece of property. Well, it's kind of the point, right? And because if they put their house up for sale, they would want to maximize the amount of money they got for it, even beyond what its value is in its current use.
Exactly.
And so I would never be a fan of statewide planning and zoning, because I know what goes along with that, a lot of bureaucracy. But at the same time, all of those kind of rules do what you were talking about, that limits your ability to utilize your property the way you want. And we have those specific rights in our country.
Exactly. And what I try to talk to my folks about here, because as I said initially, when I was reading about these things, this wasn't all the information that's out there now wasn't around. There were, you start looking at why the big press now. And there's about 5,000 data centers in the United States. Some of those are just, small racks of servers. There's a MasterCard facility not very far from here. You drive by it every day, and people don't realize that's what it is. It's a data center. But then we start getting into, some of these are rather large developments. They start worrying about the natural resources, water contamination, water usage, the electric rates going up, all of that. But even when you read them statute that says, if you're a large load consumer, you will pay for every piece of infrastructure and all of your electric usage without any kind of break. People just don't want to buy that. They don't want to listen. And then so digging down, there was an article, and it's a website called Just the News. I'm one of those that I read that I think kind of calls balls and strikes, but they were talking about the violence associated with this. There was a Indiana council member who voted for one in a town there, and they drove by and shot up his house.
Yeah.
What motivates somebody to do that? Well, then they started digging into the money. A guy by the name of Hans-Jörg Wyss out of Switzerland, billionaire, climate activist. There's another guy that manages a hedge fund over in England, billionaire, climate activist. And then what it is, it's to handicap the United States from building out our AI infrastructure, our manufacturing, and our electrical grid, because they want us all, using solar panels. Well, they don't work when the sun doesn't shine, and we can't run windmills at night because they kill bats. And it's like they would rather have us hamstrung than let America use cheap energy that we use now, coal, natural gas, fossil fuels, to be able to make our economy strong. And you really do need to look at where this is coming from and examine, because the amount of propaganda that I see out there is just insane. And if you get in like the comments section on a Facebook group, people don't use their name and their picture anymore. It's all aliases or, Jim Jab or whatever it is. And it's like, okay, you're just a bot.
The strict irony of that is that they're using the data center in order to promote their particular idea, not realizing that the only reason the data center is there is because they're using that social media. And, kind of going back to what I told the folks down there, if you quit using that stuff, the data center goes away. There's no profit motive anymore because it's not there. But the data center is the size it is today. But we had talked earlier about Moore's law and about how much more of that is going to be compressed. And so that data center will expand in its ability as time goes on, and it won't have to get any bigger. I mean, we would argue that it's probably big enough right now, but so would they. And so because the cost of doing business increases, the more power they use, they will devise systems by which they will use less power, where they use less water. And because that's the foundational building blocks of our country is, a free market society, and you maximize your profit by reducing your costs. And so these folks will do those kind of things. Now, do I believe, and I think you do too, that this information, it's currently right now, but can be used for nefarious purposes. And just like any other tool, we talked about this earlier, that, in any tool you can think of, you can think of 10 good uses for it, but you can also think of 100 bad ones that have been used in that regard. And this is no different. But then that's when it's incumbent on the government to put in the proper guardrails for that kind of thing. I think that you probably agree with me that the unfortunate part about that is that this stuff is moving at light speed. And give me an idea of the speed at which we move up in the Capitol.
We are about 3 to 5 years behind on any topic on a regular basis, just because by the time we research it, by the time you have to go get a consensus built that, hey, this is a decent idea, that we need to be doing something about this, convince enough of your peers to vote for it, and oh, by the way, get it through that other side of the building. It takes a
you
while.
have to convince a bunch of lobbyists that it doesn't affect their client, right?
That was my next point. Yeah, they all want to put their finger in the dam.
Yeah, so that and the reality is that time moves forward, things change, and they constantly do. And humans are really good at adapting. With what we don't want is we don't want the machine to finally realize that it doesn't need us anymore. And that's where I think our function in government is. And but you have rightly pointed it out. By the time we address the problem today, the problem will have changed tenfold in the amount of time it takes us to do that. And therein lies the real challenge of your future legislature.
I agree. And, there are several bills that were introduced on AI this year that really didn't get much traction.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that I think we need to start turning up the burner, so to speak, and get the water boiling a little quicker, so we can start tackling those issues.
Yeah. And I had a bill that would have required, if you're under 16 years old, your parents had to create your TikTok and your Facebook and all that. And I had no less than 3 lobbyists call me and tell me how unconstitutional it was, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, so when did you get appointed to the Supreme Court? And so they admitted that they weren't, but they were assuring me that it was unconstitutional. And I said, so what's your basis for that? Well, this same law is being, companies are suing over this same law in other states. And I said, I can't wait. Let's get that thing to the Supreme Court and let's find out the constitutionality of what parents can allow their children to do. And I said, so I'm going ahead with my bill. But as you and I both know, his voice is a little bit stronger than mine up in that building. So
they operate with folks sometimes that control the flow of legislation for sure.
And so but as time progresses, we know, and so do those folks who represent those special interests, that eventually it will get done. And, they're just trying to push off that timeline as long as they can so they can get more checks from their client.
Exactly.
Well, hey, Jeff, we got about 7 minutes. Is there anything of compelling interest around data centers, first of all, that the folks are to know about, and what has kind of talk about what your experience with, I think it was Google who is doing the one up in your district. How have those folks been to work with?
That's been really surprising. One of the things that Google's doing is outside of the taxes that they're going to pay. So understand that in Montgomery County alone, there's going to be a Google data center, hyperscale data center, and there's going to be an Amazon AWS hyperscale data center literally right across the road.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
They're going to be paying about $105 million into a county that their operating budget's about 17 million. Their school district operating budget's 14. And so what that's going to do is obviously put pressure on the taxing entities to reduce theirs to a minimum or make them go away. And those are the discussions we're having now is, in the school districts they're going to have this windfall of money. What is it that we can do to reduce everybody's property taxes? Do you rebate that back on personal property tax? Do you rebate residential property tax back? So you still have to keep the levy in place. So the one entity is paying it on the commercial side, but do you reduce that back to where you're paying nothing?
So I wonder if the conversation was started at one of these town hall meetings, is that if you started a conversation like this, hey, we're going to get rid of your property taxes entirely. And then they ask, well, how are you going to do that? Well, we're going to put in this big hyperscale data center, and they're going to be paying so much in property tax that yours will virtually disappear. I wonder if we would get any resistance to a data center at that point.
I think I tried to say that in Denton County, and it didn't go well.
So there was probably a few folks that weren't paying, didn't have any exposure in that category. And it's kind of like on the income tax, that most of the people who I've noticed they're against it aren't paying income tax right now. So, which is a good reason, I suppose, to be against it, against the changes in it. I don't know, but there is that dynamic that goes to work there.
And one of the other unseen things that both of these companies do that I don't think get enough credit is they want to be good community partners. Well, first of all, when we talk about the environmental stuff, they worry about their ESG score. We don't really here in Missouri,
right.
But those companies do. And so they don't want to be a polluter of the water. They don't want to consume as many resources as possible. They want to try to do all these things minimalistically. The other thing is, like, Google's set aside $10 million that they'll pay to the Port Authority every year. And the reason why they give it to the Port Authority, and this is above all the property taxes and personal property taxes that are even abated, they're going to pay. And that $10 million, 5% goes to school districts outside of the taxing, or to 2 school districts outside the taxing district, and to the fire departments. The remainder of that, they're going to keep in reserve in the Port Authority. So say you're a small town like Jonesburg, Missouri, and your sewer system needs reworked. Here's a couple $1 million. You can get that done. You need your water tower painted down in Rhineland. Here's $500,000. Get that done.
Right.
What's that start doing to that when you have one entity that's paying the property tax of 20,000 residents without the 20,000 residents? I mean, that for me as a small town guy in rural America and rural Missouri really does mean a lot to me. And I want to keep it that way. There's a reason why I live where I live. You're going to give me all of that where I can reduce my property taxes. And my school district's no longer standing out there with their hand out for bond issues. My fire department, my EMS, they've got state-of-the-art equipment now. They're all getting well paid. They're staying here for a very long time.
Well,
what does that look like to live there?
Well, we've got about 2 minutes left, Jeff, and so that in itself has its own dangers, right? It's the old company town mentality, right? That if Google's paying for everything, Google gets to decide who's in charge. So there is that danger, but we need people to participate in the legislative process. We need them to vote and do all of those things, so that we can have a wide variety of ideas that come into play, so that we can make sure that we don't end up with a company town, so to speak. Well, thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate you coming on this morning. I really enjoyed it. We had covered a lot of ground on data centers, and I know you'd have a perspective on it with a lot of common sense in it. So I do appreciate you coming on, my friend.
Thank you, Don.
Jeff, just wanted to ask if there's a website or a way that people can contact you, if you can give that out real quick.
Basically, you can find me on Facebook. I use my Jeff Myers for State Representative Facebook page. That's my online presence that I use. But that's about it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you, Don. You guys take care.
All right, we're closing out the show now, and really appreciate everybody coming on. Be sure to send Dave comments, good or bad, so that he can deal with them and I don't have to. And but I'll be happy to. If somebody has a comment for me, I would be more than happy to respond to it. Thank you very much for listening this morning.
Yeah, we've got about 40 seconds left here, and it's been a little different these last 2 weeks not having Dave on, but between you and Bill, we got through it.
We got through it somehow. We muddled through.
And we still had viewers. We didn't lose people. So, and Dave was pleased with the show last week, and I'm sure he'll be reviewing this week's show. And, but I'm sure these 3 hours actually went by pretty quickly again.
Yeah, I'm certain that the listenership went down when me and Bill was talking about quantum computing and those kind of things.
We'll see. Maybe not. You might be surprised. Don, thanks so much for guest hosting.
Oh, it was fun. I love it.
Thank you all for listening. Be back next week with Dave back, 8 o'clock next Friday.